What if I told you that buried beneath the sands of northern Mesopotamia lies evidence of one of history's most dramatic military revolutions, a transformation so complete that it reshaped an entire civilization and created an empire that would dominate the ancient world for centuries? Deep within the archaeological layers of ancient cities, researchers have uncovered a story that challenges everything we thought we knew about Bronze Age warfare and political power. This isn't just another tale of conquest and empire building. This is the extraordinary account of how a small group of foreign warriors completely revolutionized military technology and forged one of antiquity's most formidable kingdoms from the ashes of a fractured land. During the middle of the second millennium before Christ, northern Mesopotamia resembled a shattered mosaic of competing territories. The once mighty Assyrian commercial networks had crumbled around 1750 BC, leaving behind a devastating power void that stretched across the upper Mesopotamian plains. Ancient settlements like Telbra, Tellin, and Tel Mozan tell the archaeological story of this dramatic collapse through layers of destruction and abandonment. But from this chaos emerged something unprecedented. The remnants of earlier Hurrian city-states and principalities became the foundation for an entirely new kind of political organization. Cuneiform tablets discovered at Nuzi, dating to the 15th century BC, provide fascinating glimpses into this turbulent transitional era. These clay documents reveal a landscape dominated by numerous small Hurrian kingdoms, each desperately clinging to limited territories surrounding heavily fortified urban centers. The rulers of these fragmented realms bore distinctly Hurrian names like Tisha Torla and Shaatar, demonstrating how indigenous leadership structures persisted despite mounting external pressures. Yet this very fragmentation proved to be their greatest weakness. These isolated kingdoms found themselves constantly vulnerable to internal conflicts and external threats, creating perfect conditions for the dramatic transformation that was about to unfold. The game changer arrived during the 17th and 16th centuries BC in the form of Indo-Aryan warrior bands. These formidable newcomers, most likely originating from either the Iranian plateau or the Central Asian steppes, brought revolutionary military technologies and organizational methods that would fundamentally alter the regional balance of power forever. Archaeological evidence from sites like Tel el-Rima reveals the sudden appearance of horse burials, sophisticated bronze horse bits, and chariot components that coincide perfectly with the earliest references to Indo-Aryan personal names in cuneiform sources. This wasn't merely a military invasion, it represented a complete technological and cultural transformation. The integration between these Indo-Aryan elites and the existing Hurrian population created something entirely unique, a hybrid culture that masterfully combined indigenous administrative wisdom with groundbreaking military innovations. Tablets recovered from Kirka preserve extensive lists of personal names that demonstrate this remarkable cultural fusion. Indo-Aryan names such as Artatama, Shutana, and Tushrata began appearing alongside traditional Hurrian appellations, creating a new aristocratic class that drew from both traditions. Even more significantly, these documents reveal the adoption of Sanskrit-derived terminology specifically related to horse training and chariot warfare. Technical terms like Ekavartana and Trivartana indicate sophisticated equestrian knowledge that had never before existed in Mesopotamian military practice. The technological revolution brought by horse-drawn chariots represents one of history's most significant military innovations. Each war chariot required meticulous construction using carefully seasoned wood, precision bronze fittings, and expertly crafted leather components. This represented an enormous investment in both rare materials and highly skilled craftsmanship that only a centralized state could effectively organize and maintain. These vehicles measured approximately 2 meters in length and featured lightweight spoked wheels that provided dramatically superior speed and maneuverability compared to the solid-wheeled carts used in earlier periods. The training programs required for both horses and charioteers demanded years of intensive preparation, effectively creating a professional warrior class that possessed skills completely unavailable to traditional infantry forces. Archaeological excavations at Tel Halaf have uncovered extensive stabling facilities and training grounds that illustrate the massive scale of this military transformation. The remains include stone-lined drainage channels, feeding troughs carved from basalt blocks, and carefully maintained exercise yards with surfaces specifically designed for chariot maneuvers. Skeletal analysis of horse remains from these contexts reveals animals standing 14 to 15 hands high, breeds specifically developed for speed and endurance rather than the heavy draft work, typical of earlier agricultural periods. The geographic consolidation of Mitanni power centered strategically on the fertile valleys of the Kabul River system, where abundant water resources and rich alluvial soils provided the essential agricultural foundation necessary to support a centralized state. The Kabul Triangle, naturally bounded by the Euphrates to the west and the Tigris to the east, offered significant defensive advantages while simultaneously facilitating control over crucial trade routes connecting Anatolia, Syria, and southern Mesopotamia. Satellite imagery combined with extensive ground surveys have identified numerous tell sites throughout this region that show clear evidence of fortification and urban planning, consistent with Mitanni administrative control. The establishment of Washakani as the royal capital represented a calculated decision to create an entirely new center of power rather than adopting an existing urban center with established traditions and potentially competing loyalties. Archaeological investigation of potential sites for Wasakani, including Tel Fakaria and Tel Brak, suggests a substantial urban complex featuring royal palaces, administrative buildings, and residential quarters arranged according to sophisticated planned layouts. The capital's strategic location in the heart of the Kabul Valley provided optimal access to agricultural resources while maintaining highly defensible positions against potential enemies from any direction. This wasn't just military conquest. It was the birth of a new kind of ancient superpower that would dominate Near Eastern politics for centuries to come. The story of how these Indo-Aryan warriors transformed a fractured landscape into a unified empire reveals the incredible power of technological innovation combined with strategic political organization. The warfare patterns established during these initial confrontations would define Mitanni military doctrine for generations to come, creating a revolutionary approach that transformed ancient Near Eastern combat forever. Mitanni commanders developed tactics that prioritized swift mobility and lightning-fast strikes over the traditional methods of prolonged sieges and territorial occupation that dominated contemporary warfare. Their superior chariot technology provided decisive tactical advantages that allowed Mitanni forces to strike devastating blows before rapidly withdrawing to carefully prepared defensive positions. This innovative strategy proved devastatingly effective against adversaries who continued relying on conventional infantry formations and outdated siege warfare techniques. While enemy armies slowly maneuvered their heavy foot soldiers into position, Mitanni chariot squadrons could appear from seemingly nowhere, unleash chaos upon their targets, and vanish before effective countermeasures could be organized. The evolution of Mitanni military organization perfectly reflected the kingdom's unique hybrid political structure, seamlessly blending Indo-Aryan leadership principles with established Hurrian administrative practices and indigenous military customs. Elite chariot squadrons formed the backbone of every Mitanni army, with each specialized unit consisting of multiple vehicles supported by carefully selected infantry contingents recruited from local populations throughout the empire. These complex training programs demanded extensive coordination between different military branches, requiring months of intensive practice to achieve the precise timing and flawless communication essential for successful battlefield operations. Chariot crews had to master not only individual vehicle handling, but also sophisticated group maneuvers that could adapt instantly to changing combat conditions. The groundbreaking military innovations that had originally enabled Mitanni's territorial consolidation soon evolved into the systematic foundation for ambitious expansion campaigns across northern Mesopotamia and the fertile Syrian plains. King Paratana, whose documented reign around 1500 BC marked the beginning of recorded Mitanni imperial ambitions, launched brilliantly coordinated military expeditions specifically designed to secure absolute control over the essential trade arteries connecting the resource-rich Anatolian highlands with the prosperous commercial centers of Babylon and Assyria. Archaeological evidence from strategic sites like Tel Beidar and Tel Amarna reveals extensive destruction layers precisely dating to this aggressive expansion period. followed by comprehensive reconstruction phases featuring unmistakably Mitanni architectural elements and specialized administrative installations that demonstrated the kingdom's sophisticated occupation strategies. Understanding the critical strategic importance of these commercial trade routes proves essential for comprehending Mitanni's carefully calculated expansion priorities. Merchant caravans transporting precious tin from Anatolian sources, vital copper from the Taurus mountain regions, and valuable silver from Zagros deposits required guaranteed safe passage through territories that had previously witnessed constant warfare between numerous competing small kingdoms. Mitanni military forces systematically occupied crucial river crossing points along both the Euphrates and Tigris systems, constructing heavily fortified outposts capable of continuously monitoring all commercial traffic, while simultaneously extracting substantial taxation revenues from passing merchants. Excavations at sites such as Tel Sheikh Hamad have uncovered sophisticated customs installations featuring standardized weights, precision measuring devices, and extensive storage facilities specifically designed to efficiently process and tax all merchandise passing through expanding Mitanni territories. The kingdom's meticulously planned military campaigns followed carefully orchestrated sequences that demonstrated remarkable understanding of complex regional geography and predictable seasonal patterns. Springtime offensives typically targeted vulnerable agricultural regions during critical planting seasons when enemy populations faced maximum disruption and possessed minimal capacity for mounting effective resistance against Mitanni advances. Lightning-fast Mitanni chariot squadrons would sweep mercilessly across cultivated plains, systematically destroying standing crops and vital irrigation infrastructure, while deliberately avoiding heavily fortified urban centers that could potentially withstand prolonged siege operations. This calculated approach maximized devastating economic damage, while simultaneously minimizing Mitanni military casualties, effectively forcing enemy rulers into accepting tributary arrangements rather than risking complete agricultural collapse and population starvation. King Shaushtatar, who successfully succeeded Paratana around 1480 BC, elevated these proven tactical innovations into a comprehensive imperial strategy that would define Mitanni dominance for decades. Cuneiform tablets discovered at Nuzi provide detailed descriptions of his audacious campaigns against the Assyrian heartland, where advancing Mitanni forces penetrated southward as far as the very suburbs of Ashur itself. The profound psychological impact of these devastating raids proved equally significant as their immediate material effects, conclusively demonstrating to Assyrian political elites that their traditional defensive strategies could no longer guarantee security against Mitanni mobile warfare innovations. Assyrian historical chronicles from this turbulent period describe desperate attempts to rapidly recruit additional chariot units and expensive foreign mercenaries, clearly indicating the overwhelming military pressure exerted by relentless Mitanni territorial expansion. The sophisticated integration of newly conquered territories into the established Mitanni administrative framework revealed the kingdom's remarkably advanced approach to imperial governance. Rather than brutally imposing rigid uniform control over culturally diverse populations, Mitanni administrators skillfully developed flexible political arrangements that carefully preserved valued local customs while simultaneously ensuring unwavering political loyalty and consistent economic tribute payments. Highly trained Hurrian scribes, expertly educated in both cuneiform writing systems and regional languages, served as essential intermediaries between appointed Mitanni governors and various subject communities. These crucial officials maintained incredibly detailed records documenting population levels, agricultural production statistics, and military service obligations that enabled central authorities to optimize resource extraction procedures without triggering widespread rebellions or popular uprisings. Archaeological investigations at Tel Lelen have uncovered extensive archival collections documenting these intricate administrative procedures in extraordinary detail. Preserved tablets describe the formal appointment ceremonies of local rulers as official Mitanni vassals, complete with elaborate investiture rituals that masterfully combine traditional Hurrian ceremonial elements with distinctive Indo-Aryan oath-taking procedures. Newly appointed vassal kings received prestigious bronze swords, elaborate gold jewelry, and ceremonial chariots as powerful symbols of their subordinate status, while simultaneously providing valuable hostages, substantial annual tribute payments, and military contingents to demonstrate their continued loyalty to the royal court at Wasukani. The distinctive political structure emerging from this systematic expansion process represented a truly unique fusion of established Hurrian administrative traditions with innovative Indo-Aryan military aristocracy. The evolving Mitanni royal court developed elaborate hierarchical systems that clearly distinguish between different categories of nobles based on their ethnic origins, specific military functions, and territorial responsibilities throughout the expanding empire. Indo-Aryan chariot warriors occupied the most prestigious military ranks, bearing distinguished titles such as Merianu that derive directly from Sanskrit terminology describing warrior castes. These military elites received substantial land grants in conquered territories, creating a feudal-like system that directly tied military service obligations to agricultural revenue generation. Hurrian administrators, meanwhile, maintained exclusive control over civilian governance, taxation systems, and diplomatic correspondence. Their invaluable expertise in cuneiform literacy, complex legal procedures, and regional languages made them absolutely indispensable for managing the intricate relationships between the royal court and diverse subject populations. The robust economic foundations supporting Mitanni's ambitious imperial expansion extended far beyond simple agricultural taxation to encompass sophisticated exploitation of valuable mineral resources and extensive commercial networks. The kingdom's strategic control over lucrative copper mining operations in the Taurus Mountains provided crucial access to raw materials essential for large-scale bronze production, while specialized Mitanni workshops developed advanced metallurgical techniques that consistently produced superior weapons and tools. These groundbreaking initial encounters established enduring conflict patterns that would fundamentally shape Near Eastern international relations for the following century, as two mighty empires fiercely competed for dominance over the prosperous Syrian city-states that controlled access to lucrative Mediterranean trade networks. Thutmose's inaugural campaign marked the first documented military confrontation between Egyptian and Mitanni strategic doctrines, exposing profound fundamental differences in their respective approaches to warfare and territorial administration. Egyptian military commanders traditionally relied heavily on rigidly disciplined infantry formations, by relatively modest numbers of supporting chariots, consistently emphasizing systematic siege warfare and methodical occupation of heavily fortified positions. Mitanni armies, conversely, had perfected tactics that prioritized lightning-fast mobility and devastating rapid strikes designed to avoid costly prolonged engagements, while maximizing catastrophic disruption to enemy supply lines and vital communication networks. The decisive Battle of Kadesh, fought approximately around 1490 BC, dramatically illustrated these contrasting tactical philosophies in spectacular fashion. Egyptian historical chronicles provide vivid descriptions of Mitanni chariot squadrons materializing unexpectedly from multiple directions simultaneously, executing brilliantly coordinated attacks against vulnerable Egyptian supply columns before expertly withdrawing to carefully prepared defensive positions strategically located throughout the surrounding mountainous terrain. Egyptian infantry formations, extensively trained for traditional frontal assaults against stationary defensive structures, demonstrated poor adaptation to these revolutionary mobile combat techniques. The fierce engagement concluded inconclusively, with Egyptian forces successfully maintaining control over the immediate battlefield area, while Mitanni units preserved complete freedom of movement throughout the broader regional landscape. Under the ambitious leadership of Thutmose III, Egyptian military strategy underwent significant evolution to address the formidable Mitanni threat more effectively. The pharaoh's comprehensive campaigns spanning from 1479 to 1457 BC featured substantially enlarged chariot contingents, dramatically improved logistical support systems, and meticulously coordinated naval operations that significantly reduced Egyptian dependence on highly vulnerable overland supply routes. The legendary Battle of Megiddo in 1457 BC while primarily involving Syrian allies rather than direct Mitanni forces, conclusively demonstrated Egyptian adaptation to innovative mobile warfare techniques originally pioneered by their northern adversaries. Mitanni responses to mounting Egyptian pressure revealed the kingdom's remarkably sophisticated understanding of complex international diplomacy and intricate alliance systems. Rather than engaging Egyptian armies in direct confrontation, astute Mitanni rulers systematically cultivated beneficial relationships with strategically positioned Syrian city-states that could effectively serve as protective buffer zones against relentless Egyptian expansion. Preserved treaties discovered in the extensive archives of Marian Ugarit describe incredibly complex arrangements whereby Mitanni provided essential military support and valuable commercial privileges to local rulers in exchange for crucial strategic cooperation against advancing Egyptian forces. These innovative diplomatic initiatives extended far beyond mere military alliances to encompass extensive cultural and economic exchanges that substantially strengthened Mitanni influence throughout the entire region. Skilled Mitanni craftsmen introduced revolutionary bronze-working techniques to Syrian workshops, while enterprising Mitanni merchants established permanent trading posts in major commercial centers across the Levant. Archaeological evidence from strategic sites such as Tel Echana reveals abundant presence of distinctive Mitanni-style pottery, elaborate jewelry, and superior weapons that clearly indicate sustained cultural interaction rather than temporary military occupation. The progressive development of Mitanni's sophisticated imperial administration during this crucial period necessitated groundbreaking innovations in communication systems capable of coordinating diverse activities across immense distances. Royal messengers regularly traveled well-established routes connecting Wasakani with distant provincial centers, carrying carefully sealed tablets containing detailed instructions for appointed local governors. Archaeological discoveries of strategically positioned way stations and supply depots along these routes clearly indicate the highly systematic nature of Mitanni communication networks, with specialized facilities positioned at regular intervals to provide fresh horses and essential provisions for traveling official personnel. Intelligence gathering represented another absolutely crucial aspect of Mitanni imperial administration, as the kingdom's very survival depended entirely on acquiring accurate information regarding enemy movements and strategic intentions. Skilled Mitanni agents operated extensively throughout Syria and Mesopotamia, frequently disguised as ordinary merchants or traveling craftsmen while secretly collecting vital information about military preparations, significant political developments, and changing economic conditions. Diplomatic correspondence from this turbulent period occasionally references these covert intelligence activities, though the inherently secretive nature of such sensitive operations severely limits available detailed documentation. The continuous technological innovations supporting Mitanni military supremacy kept evolving throughout this intensive expansion period, with particular focused attention directed toward advanced chariot design and sophisticated horse breeding programs. Archaeological remains of Mitanni chariots recovered from sites such as Tel Brak demonstrate significant refinements in wheel construction techniques, axle design improvements, and body configuration modifications that substantially enhance performance while simultaneously reducing overall vehicle weight. These revolutionary vehicles featured precision bronze reinforcements at critical stress points, innovative leather suspension systems that effectively absorbed shock during high-speed combat maneuvers, and specialized harness arrangements that maximized individual horse efficiency. Extensive horse breeding operations expanded dramatically to meet the increasing demands of Mitanni's rapidly growing chariot forces, with royal stud farms systematically established in regions offering optimal grazing conditions and reliable water access. Detailed skeletal analysis of horse remains recovered from Mitanni archaeological sites indicates highly selective breeding programs that deliberately emphasize speed, endurance, and temperament characteristics, specifically suitable for demanding military applications. These carefully bred animals typically measured between 14 and 15 hands in height, featuring bone structure specifically optimized for sustained high-speed running rather than heavy draft work, typical of agricultural applications. The methodical expansion of Mitanni influenced westward into Syria, inevitably brought the ambitious kingdom into direct confrontation with Egyptian imperial ambitions under the formidable Thutmose III, whose systematic military campaigns fundamentally transformed the established balance of power across the ancient Near East. The pharaoh's methodical approach to Levantine conquest differed dramatically from earlier Egyptian expeditions, successfully incorporating valuable lessons learned from previous encounters with revolutionary Mitanni mobile warfare tactics. His reorganized forces now included substantially enlarged chariot contingents, numbering over 1,000 vehicles, according to detailed inscriptions preserved at Karnak, along with specialized siege equipment and carefully coordinated naval support that significantly reduced dangerous dependence on vulnerable overland supply lines. The climactic Battle of Megiddo in 1457 BC represented the ultimate culmination of these comprehensive Egyptian military reforms. Though the massive engagement primarily involved Syrian city-states allied with Mitanni rather than direct confrontation with the kingdom's primary forces, Egyptian military records describe an impressive coalition of over 300 Syrian and Palestinian rulers assembled under the experienced leadership of Kadesh's king, reinforced by elite Mitanni chariot squadrons and experienced military advisors. The coalition's strategic position at Megiddo effectively controlled the crucial Aruna Pass, which provided the most direct route connecting Egypt with northern Syria through the challenging Carmel Ridge. Thutmose III's bold tactical decision to advance through the treacherous narrow Aruna Pass, despite urgent warnings from his experienced generals about the extreme vulnerability of his forces in the confined mountainous terrain, clearly demonstrated the pharaoh's absolute confidence in Egyptian military capabilities. The advancing Egyptian army stretched over several kilometers as it carefully navigated the dangerous mountain defile, with advanced scouts continuously reporting enemy positions on the plains beyond. Archaeological surveys of the battlefield area have successfully identified ancient road surfaces and defensive positions that correspond precisely to Egyptian accounts of the engagement, including substantial stone walls and earthworks that show clear evidence of hasty construction by the defending coalition forces. The decisive Egyptian triumph at Megiddo emerged from exceptional coordination between diverse military units rather than superior technological advantages, as both opposing forces possessed remarkably comparable equipment and training standards. Thutmose III's disciplined forces maintained rigorous formations throughout the entire engagement, effectively preventing coalition chariots from exploiting the tactical gaps in Egyptian battle lines that had proven absolutely decisive in numerous earlier encounters across the region. The pharaoh's inspirational personal leadership during absolutely critical moments, particularly his conspicuous positioning in the front ranks of the devastating chariot charge, provided substantial psychological advantages that successfully compensated for the coalition's superior knowledge of local terrain features and defensive positions. The prolonged siege of Megiddo that followed the spectacular battlefield victory revealed sophisticated Egyptian adaptations to Mitanni-influenced defensive strategies that had revolutionized urban warfare. Coalition forces had meticulously prepared extensive fortifications, incorporating valuable lessons learned from previous Egyptian military campaigns, including multiple layered defensive lines, elaborate underground tunnel networks for secure supply and communication, and specialized strategic positions designed for devastating chariot counterattacks. Egyptian siege techniques had correspondingly evolved, featuring brilliantly coordinated assaults, launched simultaneously from multiple directions, systematic destruction of vital water sources, and the methodical construction of circumvallation walls that effectively prevented coalition reinforcements from reaching their desperate defenders trapped within the city. Archaeological excavations at Tel El Mut Selim, the ancient site of Megiddo, have successfully uncovered extensive destruction layers that correspond chronologically with remarkable precision to Thutmose III's historical campaign. These archaeological deposits contain distinctive Egyptian-style arrowheads, superior bronze weapons, and pottery fragments that definitively confirm the detailed historical accounts of the siege operations. More significantly, these excavations reveal compelling evidence of systematic urban planning during the subsequent reconstruction phase, featuring Egyptian administrative buildings and specialized storage facilities that clearly indicate direct imperial control rather than traditional tributary arrangements with local authorities. The far-reaching strategic consequences of the Egyptian victory extended dramatically beyond immediate military results, fundamentally transforming the established political landscape across Syria and Palestine for generations. Syrian city-states that had previously maintained cherished independence through reliable Mitanni protection now confronted direct Egyptian administration, with appointed pharaonic governors systematically replacing hereditary local rulers and permanent Egyptian garrisons occupying every major urban center throughout the region. This comprehensive transformation severely disrupted traditional commercial relationships and forced skilled Mitanni diplomats to develop entirely new strategies for maintaining political influence in regions now beyond their direct military reach or control. Mitanni responses to relentless Egyptian expansion demonstrated the kingdom's remarkably sophisticated understanding of asymmetric warfare principles and complex alliance politics. Rather than attempting to match overwhelming Egyptian military strength through costly direct confrontation, astute Mitanni rulers strategically focused their resources on supporting anti-Egyptian coalitions that could maintain continuous pressure on pharaonic forces while carefully conserving their own precious military assets. This innovative approach demanded careful coordination with regional leaders who possessed intimate knowledge of local terrain features and population dynamics, but fundamentally lacked the advanced military technology necessary to challenge disciplined Egyptian armies independently without external support. The strategic importance of Damascus became increasingly apparent as both expanding empires recognized its absolutely crucial position controlling vital trade routes, connecting prosperous Mesopotamia with the lucrative Mediterranean coastal regions. The city's advantageous location at the intersection of major caravan pathways made it essential for maintaining profitable commercial relationships with wealthy Phoenician ports, while its fertile agricultural hinterland provided abundant resources necessary for supporting substantial military forces during extended campaign seasons. Mitanni efforts to secure Damascus's political allegiance involved extraordinarily complex negotiations that carefully balanced cherished local autonomy against imperial obligations, offering reliable protection from devastating Egyptian raids in exchange for regular tribute payments and essential military cooperation during critical periods. Archaeological evidence recovered from Damascus indicates significant Mitanni cultural influence throughout this pivotal period, including the widespread adoption of traditional Hurrian religious practices and distinctive Indo-Aryan personal names among the influential local elite classes. Intricately carved cylinder seals bearing authentic Mitanni royal symbols have been discovered in contexts, suggesting their regular use by appointed local administrators, while recovered bronze weapons demonstrate metallurgical techniques entirely consistent with specialized Mitanni workshop production methods. These distinctive cultural markers clearly indicate sustained political relationships rather than temporary military occupation, perfectly reflecting Mitanni preferences for indirect administrative control over distant territories beyond their immediate sphere of influence. Egyptian countermeasures designed to undermine growing Mitanni influence in Damascus involved both direct military pressure and sophisticated diplomatic initiatives, specifically designed to systematically destroy the kingdom's carefully constructed alliance network. Thutmose III's subsequent aggressive campaigns spanning from 1456 to 1450 BC methodically targeted Syrian cities that maintained pro-Mitanni policies, effectively combining devastating military conquest with surprisingly generous terms offered to rulers willing to abandon their northern allegiances completely. Egyptian historical records describe the systematic transportation of Syrian princes to Egypt for comprehensive education and cultural assimilation programs, deliberately creating an entire generation of regional leaders possessing strong personal ties to the pharaonic court and Egyptian administrative systems. The continuous evolution of chariot warfare during this intensely competitive period reflected ongoing technological competition between Egyptian and Mitanni military engineers striving for battlefield superiority. Mitanni innovations concentrated on dramatically reducing vehicle weight while simultaneously maintaining crucial structural integrity, enabling significantly faster acceleration and substantially improved maneuverability during intense battlefield engagements. Archaeological remains of advanced Mitanni chariots, recovered from sites such as Tel Brak, demonstrate remarkable refinements in wheel design that substantially reduced rolling resistance, along with innovative suspension systems that effectively absorbed shock during high-speed turns and sudden emergency stops required during combat operations. Egyptian chariot development emphasized superior durability and enhanced crew protection rather than pure speed capabilities, accurately reflecting the kingdom's established preference for sustained military engagements over lightning-fast rapid strikes favored by their northern adversaries. Egyptian vehicles featured substantially reinforced platforms capable of accommodating additional essential equipment, including powerful composite bows, abundant spare arrows, and sophisticated communication devices necessary for coordinating large-scale military operations across extended battlefields. The systematic adoption of bronze armor for chariot crews provided crucial protection against enemy projectiles, while maintaining sufficient mobility for effective combat performance during prolonged engagements. Training programs for chariot warfare expanded dramatically in both competing kingdoms as experienced military leaders recognized the absolutely decisive importance of superior crew performance in determining battle outcomes. Mitanni training programs emphasized individual initiative and rapid decision-making capabilities, with crews practicing extraordinarily complex maneuvers requiring split-second coordination between skilled drivers and expert archers. These intensive exercises took place on specially constructed training courses, designed to simulate realistic battlefield conditions, including artificial obstacles, challenging target ranges, and communication difficulties that thoroughly tested crew abilities under extreme stress conditions. Egyptian chariot training focused primarily on unit cohesion and disciplined execution of carefully predetermined tactical plans, accurately reflecting the kingdom's fundamental emphasis on coordinated military operations involving large numbers of synchronized units. Egyptian crews practiced intricate formation movements, maintaining precise spacing and perfect timing, enabling massive chariot squadrons to execute complex battlefield maneuvers without dangerous confusion or catastrophic collisions. These comprehensive training programs consistently produced highly disciplined military forces capable of maintaining combat effectiveness during prolonged engagements, though they occasionally lacked the tactical flexibility necessary for responding effectively to unexpected battlefield developments or innovative enemy strategies. The progressive development of siege warfare techniques represented another crucial area of intense competition between the rival empires competing for regional dominance. Mitanni engineers developed innovative approaches to urban defense designed to maximize the inherent advantages of interior positions, while simultaneously minimizing vulnerability to sophisticated Egyptian siege equipment and tactics. Meanwhile, kingdoms positioned throughout northern Syria steadfastly maintained their traditional political relationships with Mitanni, creating a complex web of competing loyalties that would define regional politics for decades. The alliance-building strategies developed by both expanding empires involved remarkably sophisticated combinations of military support, substantial economic incentives, and comprehensive cultural exchange programs specifically designed to create enduring political relationships that could withstand external pressures and internal challenges. Skilled Mitanni diplomats consistently offered access to revolutionary military technologies, including closely guarded chariot construction techniques and specialized horse training programs, while simultaneously providing reliable protection from aggressive Assyrian expansion pressures that increasingly threatened numerous Syrian kingdoms throughout the region. These carefully negotiated arrangements typically involved formal treaty relationships that precisely specified mutual obligations while deliberately preserving cherished local autonomy in internal governmental affairs. Egyptian alliance strategies, conversely, emphasized the substantial benefits of voluntary incorporation into a stable imperial system that guaranteed security, unprecedented economic opportunities, and remarkable cultural advancement for participating populations. Experienced Egyptian administrators regularly offered Syrian rulers prestigious positions within the established imperial hierarchy, along with valuable access to profitable Egyptian markets and renowned educational institutions that could significantly benefit local populations seeking advancement. These attractive inducements proved particularly effective with kingdoms that had suffered chronically from persistent instability or formidable external threats that exceeded their independent military capabilities and defensive resources. The gradual but unmistakable shift in regional power balance became increasingly apparent through evolving patterns of tribute payments, military cooperation agreements, and diplomatic correspondence that clearly reflected changing political relationships throughout Syria and Palestine. Egyptian administrative documents from this transformative period record substantially increasing tribute revenues collected from Syrian territories, along with growing numbers of Syrian contingents actively serving in pharaonic military campaigns across multiple theatres of operation. These significant developments indicate successful Egyptian integration of conquered territories into sophisticated imperial administrative systems that maximized resource extraction while maintaining political stability. Mitanni influence, meanwhile, became increasingly concentrated in northern Syria and upper Mesopotamia, where the kingdom maintained direct administrative control over core territories while exercising indirect political influence through carefully cultivated alliance relationships with strategically positioned local rulers. This geographic consolidation accurately reflected practical limitations on Mitanni military capabilities rather than deliberate strategic preferences, as the kingdom fundamentally lacked the extensive administrative infrastructure necessary for governing distant territories under constant Egyptian military pressure and diplomatic interference. The intensifying competition for control over crucial commercial centers escalated dramatically as both empires recognized the absolutely vital economic importance of maintaining reliable access to international trade networks that connected diverse regions. Strategic cities such as Aleppo, Carchemish, and Ugarit occupied essential positions along lucrative trade routes connecting resource-rich Anatolia, prosperous Mesopotamia, and the profitable Mediterranean coast, making their political allegiances absolutely essential for sustained imperial economic prosperity and military funding. Both Egyptian and Mitanni diplomats invested substantial resources in systematically cultivating beneficial relationships with influential merchants and powerful local officials who effectively controlled these extensive commercial networks and could determine trade route accessibility. The momentous ascension of King Soshtetar II to the Mitanni throne around 1400 BC coincided precisely with a fundamental transformation in Near Eastern geopolitics that would completely reshape the kingdom's foreign policy priorities for generations to come. Archaeological evidence recovered from Bogasco reveals the systematic expansion of formidable Hittite military installations across central Anatolia during this crucial period, with heavily fortified positions extending southward toward the traditional boundaries of established Mitanni influence in northern Syria. Hittite cuneiform tablets provide detailed descriptions of coordinated military campaigns under King Tudalia Mai that systematically targeted vulnerable Mitanni vassal states along the upper Euphrates, employing devastating siege warfare techniques that proved overwhelmingly effective against traditional Hurrian defensive strategies and fortification designs. The emerging Hittite military machine that developed during this period represented a qualitative leap in Anatolian military capabilities, successfully incorporating valuable lessons learned from decades of intensive conflict with various regional powers throughout the ancient Near East. Hittite armies featured heavily armored infantry formations, equipped with superior iron weapons that provided decisive advantages over bronze-armed opponents, while their siege trains included sophisticated equipment capable of breaching even the strongest contemporary fortifications. Archaeological excavations at Hittite military sites have revealed extensive standardized weapon production facilities, comprehensive training grounds, and sophisticated logistical infrastructure that effectively supported sustained military campaigns across vast distances previously considered impossible to traverse. Shoshtatar's strategic assessment of this emerging threat demonstrated remarkable foresight regarding the rapidly changing balance of power throughout the ancient Near East. Extensive Mitanni intelligence networks operating throughout Anatolia and northern Syria provided detailed reports concerning Hittite military preparations that included massive troop concentrations, strategic supply depot construction, and diplomatic overtures to anti-Mitanni factions within Syrian city-states seeking to change their political allegiances. These crucial intelligence reports, preserved in fragmentary form within later Assyrian archives, describe formidable Hittite forces numbering in the tens of thousands, supported by sophisticated siege equipment and extensive logistical systems that enabled prolonged operations far from Anatolian bases and supply centers. The sobering recognition that traditional Mitanni military doctrine could not effectively counter this new Hittite threat prompted a comprehensive re-evaluation of the kingdom's fundamental strategic priorities and military organization. Mitanni chariot forces, while still formidable against Egyptian and Assyrian opponents, proved disturbingly vulnerable to innovative Hittite combined arms tactics that skillfully integrated heavy infantry, specialized archery units, and siege equipment into coordinated battlefield formations. The profound psychological impact of early Hittite victories against Mitanni allies created additional diplomatic challenges as Syrian vassal states began seriously questioning the kingdom's ability to provide effective protection against this menacing northern threat to their independence. The diplomatic revolution that followed represented one of the most dramatic policy reversals in ancient Near Eastern history, as Shah-Shtatar initiated secret negotiations with Egyptian representatives despite decades of bitter military confrontation between the two mighty empires. These preliminary discussions, conducted through trusted intermediaries operating in neutral territories such as Cyprus and Crete, carefully explored possibilities for unprecedented cooperation against the common Hittite threat. Egyptian diplomatic archives from Thebes preserve references to these early contacts, describing Mitanni proposals for coordinated military action and territorial agreements that would formalize respective spheres of influence throughout Syria and Palestine. The Egyptian court's surprising receptiveness to Mitanni diplomatic overtures reflected similar concerns about aggressive Hittite expansion that increasingly threatened pharaonic interests in northern Syria and Anatolia. Thutmose IV, who had succeeded to the Egyptian throne around 1401 BC, inherited substantial military commitments across the Levant that severely strained Egyptian resources while providing limited strategic benefits for the kingdom's long-term security. The attractive prospect of securing Mitanni cooperation offered unprecedented opportunities to consolidate Egyptian control over core territories in Palestine and southern Syria, while significantly reducing military expenditures required for maintaining vulnerable northern frontiers against multiple threats. The formal peace negotiations that commenced around 1395 BC took place at Damascus, chosen for its neutral status and convenient location, accessible to representatives from both empires. The complex negotiating process extended over several months, with detailed discussions covering territorial boundaries, trade relationships, military cooperation agreements, and the intricate protocol requirements for diplomatic relations between sovereign powers. Cuneiform tablets from Mari preserved portions of these negotiations, revealing the sophisticated legal frameworks that governed international relations during this period. The territorial provisions of the emerging treaty reflected pragmatic recognition of existing military realities rather than idealistic diplomatic principles or theoretical claims. Egyptian negotiators accepted Mitanni control over northern Syria and upper Mesopotamia, including the crucial commercial centers of Carchemish and Harran, while Mitanni representatives acknowledged Egyptian sovereignty over Palestine and southern Syria. The boundary demarcation followed natural geographic features, with the Orontes River Valley serving as the primary dividing line between the two spheres of influence. Commercial clauses within the treaty established comprehensive frameworks for peaceful trade relationships that had been severely disrupted by decades of military conflict and diplomatic hostility. These provisions guaranteed safe passage for merchants traveling between Egyptian and Mitanni territories, standardized customs procedures and taxation rates, and created effective dispute resolution mechanisms for commercial disagreements. Archaeological evidence from trading posts along the newly established borders indicates rapid implementation of these commercial agreements, with Egyptian and Mitanni goods appearing in previously restricted markets within months of treaty ratification. The most innovative aspect of the diplomatic agreement involved the establishment of formal marriage alliances between the Egyptian and Mitanni royal families. This revolutionary diplomatic practice, while certainly not unknown within ancient Near Eastern international relations, had never been implemented on such a comprehensive scale or with such meticulously detailed protocol specifications that would govern every aspect of the alliance relationship. The historic marriage of Shoshtatada II's daughter to Thutmose IV represented the absolute cornerstone of this diplomatic revolution, powerfully symbolizing the complete transformation from bitter military rivalry to strategic partnership between two mighty empires. The elaborate preparations for this momentous royal marriage reveal the extraordinarily sophisticated ceremonial requirements that governed high-level diplomatic relationships throughout the ancient world. Egyptian records provide vivid descriptions of the assembly of a magnificent bridal procession that included hundreds of carefully selected attendants, vast quantities of precious gifts, and elaborate ceremonial equipment, specifically designed to demonstrate Mitanni wealth and remarkable cultural sophistication to international observers. The bride's substantial dowry included exquisite gold jewelry, ornate silver vessels, luxurious fine textiles, and expertly trained horses that represented some of the most valuable commodities available in the ancient world during this period. Mitanni preparations for the marriage ceremony masterfully incorporated both traditional Hurrian customs and innovative diplomatic protocols, specifically designed to emphasize the complete equality of the two royal houses in international standing. The royal bride received extensive education in Egyptian court etiquette, complex religious practices, and sophisticated administrative procedures that would enable her to function effectively within pharaonic society while maintaining her cultural identity. This comprehensive educational program, supervised by experienced diplomats from both kingdoms, successfully established important precedents for future marriage alliances that would become standard features of ancient Near Eastern international relations for centuries. The famous Amarna letters, discovered within the ruins of Akhenaten's revolutionary capital city, provide absolutely unprecedented insights into the detailed diplomatic correspondence that successfully sustained Egyptian-Mitanni relations throughout this remarkable alliance period. These cuneiform tablets, numbering over 350 individual documents, preserve actual diplomatic exchanges between royal courts that reveal the incredibly complex protocols governing international relations during this sophisticated era. The extensive correspondence demonstrates remarkably sophisticated understanding of diplomatic etiquette, with careful attention to proper forms of address, elaborate gift-giving procedures, and communication protocols that maintained royal dignity while simultaneously facilitating practical cooperation between former enemies. King Tushratta's personal letters to Amenhotep III illustrate the genuinely intimate nature of relationships that developed between the allied royal families during this period. These fascinating communications discuss personal family matters, health concerns, and domestic issues alongside formal diplomatic business, creating strong bonds of friendship that transcended purely political considerations and created lasting personal connections. The letters reveal Tushratta's genuine affection for his Egyptian counterpart, describing shared interests in hunting expeditions, chariot racing competitions, and religious ceremonies that provided common ground for meaningful personal relationships beyond state obligations. The sophisticated gift exchange systems documented throughout the Amarna correspondence demonstrate the significant economic dimensions of diplomatic relationships that extended far beyond merely symbolic gestures or ceremonial requirements. Elaborate Mitanni presents to the Egyptian court included intricate golden jewelry, precious stones, magnificent horses, and luxury textiles that represented substantial economic value while displaying the kingdom's wealth and exceptional craftsmanship capabilities. Egyptian reciprocal gifts featured elaborate gold ornaments, exotic animals, rare spices, and manufactured goods that showcased pharaonic prosperity and remarkable technological achievements to international audiences. These diplomatic gift exchanges served multiple crucial functions within the broader framework of international relations, establishing important precedents for future commercial relationships, while simultaneously demonstrating mutual respect between sovereign powers. The careful documentation of gift values and detailed specifications created legal records that could be referenced in future negotiations, while the public display of foreign presence enhanced royal prestige and demonstrated successful diplomatic achievements to domestic audiences. The detailed correspondence regarding diplomatic protocols reveals the extraordinarily sophisticated ceremonial requirements that governed interactions between representatives of different kingdoms throughout this period. Mitanni ambassadors traveling to Egypt received extensive briefings on proper court etiquette, including appropriate dress codes, speaking procedures, and gift presentation ceremonies designed to avoid inadvertent diplomatic insults that could damage relationships. These intricate protocols reflected deep cultural differences between Egyptian and Mitanni societies, while establishing comprehensive frameworks for respectful interaction between diverse civilizations. Despite these cultural differences, military cooperation agreements between Egypt and Mitanni focused primarily on coordinated responses to aggressive Hittite expansion rather than joint offensive operations against other regional powers. The two kingdoms established intelligence sharing arrangements that provided early warning of Hittite military preparations, while diplomatic coordination ensured consistent responses to Hittite diplomatic initiatives throughout Syria and Mesopotamia. These arrangements proved particularly valuable during major Hittite campaigns against Syrian city-states that might otherwise have fallen to Anatolian forces through effective divide-and-conquer tactics. The practical implementation of military cooperation involved incredibly complex logistical arrangements that thoroughly tested the administrative capabilities of both kingdoms. Joint military operations required precise coordination of supply lines, communication systems, and command structures that had never been attempted on such an ambitious scale in ancient warfare. Egyptian and Mitanni military engineers collaborated extensively on fortification projects that protected crucial border regions, while intelligence officers developed shared networks that continuously monitored Hittite activities across multiple theaters of operation. Archaeological evidence from Syrian border fortifications reveals the tangible results of Egyptian-Mitanni military cooperation during this alliance period. Defensive installations at strategic sites such as Tel Aviv demonstrate construction techniques that skillfully combine Egyptian engineering expertise with Mitanni knowledge of local terrain features and available materials. These sophisticated fortifications featured multiple defensive lines, underground communication tunnels, and specialized positions for chariot operations that reflected valuable lessons learned from previous conflicts with formidable Hittite forces. The coordination of diplomatic initiatives represented another crucial aspect of Egyptian-Mitanni cooperation that extended beyond purely military considerations to encompass broader political objectives. Both kingdoms recognized the vital importance of maintaining Syrian city-state allegiances through consistent diplomatic pressure that prevented Hittite agents from exploiting disagreements between the allied powers. Joint diplomatic missions to key Syrian centers demonstrated unified Egyptian-Mitanni positions, while offering coordinated incentives for continued loyalty to the alliance. The development of shared intelligence networks required unprecedented cooperation between Egyptian and Mitanni administrative systems that had previously operated as determined adversaries. Intelligence officers from both kingdoms received comprehensive cross-training in each other's languages, customs, and operational procedures, creating professional relationships that transcended traditional political boundaries and cultural differences. These intelligence sharing arrangements provided both kingdoms with comprehensive understanding of Hittite capabilities and intentions that neither could have achieved independently through their own resources. The substantial economic benefits of the Egyptian-Mitanni alliance extended throughout both kingdoms as peaceful trade relationships successfully replaced costly military confrontations that had drained resources. Mitanni merchants gained valuable access to Egyptian markets for luxury goods, horses, and manufactured products that had been prohibited during the previous conflict period, while Egyptian traders could operate safely in northern Syrian territories that had previously been hostile. These expanded commercial relationships generated substantial tax revenues that helped finance continued military preparations against the persistent Hittite threat to both kingdoms. Agricultural cooperation between the allied kingdoms involved systematic sharing of irrigation techniques, crop varieties, and farming methods that significantly improved productivity in both regions. Egyptian expertise in Nile Valley agriculture proved surprisingly adaptable to Mesopotamian conditions, while Mitanni knowledge of dryland farming techniques offered valuable solutions to Egyptian agricultural challenges in marginal areas. These technical exchanges created lasting improvements in agricultural productivity that continued benefiting both regions long after the political alliance had ended. The extensive cultural exchanges that accompanied diplomatic cooperation produced lasting influences on art, literature, and religious practices in both kingdoms throughout this period. Distinctive Mitanni artistic motifs began appearing in Egyptian decorative arts, while Egyptian architectural techniques significantly influenced Mitanni construction projects and urban planning. These cultural borrowings created innovative hybrid artistic styles that reflected the cosmopolitan nature of ancient Near Eastern civilization during this period of intensive international cooperation. The succession of Tushratta to the Mitanni throne around 1350 BC marked the beginning of the kingdom's most prosperous and culturally sophisticated period, built upon the solid diplomatic foundations established by his predecessor's alliance with Egypt. Archaeological excavations at Wasukani reveal extensive construction projects initiated during the early years of Tushratta's reign, including the ambitious expansion of the royal palace complex, with specialized quarters for foreign diplomats, elaborate reception halls decorated with imported materials, and advanced administrative buildings equipped with sophisticated record-keeping facilities. Tushratta's brilliant military campaigns against Assyria during the 1340s BC represented the absolute pinnacle of Mitanni military achievement, masterfully combining traditional chariot warfare tactics with groundbreaking siege techniques that proved devastatingly effective against sophisticated Assyrian defensive positions. The legendary Mitanni assault on Ashur itself, meticulously documented in both Mitanni royal inscriptions and later Assyrian chronicles, involved precisely coordinated attacks by multiple chariot squadrons, supported by specialized siege equipment that included bronze-reinforced battering rams, mobile siege towers, and sophisticated archery platforms, designed to overwhelm defensive capabilities. Archaeological evidence from Tel Ramah indicates the systematic destruction of Assyrian military installations throughout the Upper Tigris region, followed by the establishment of permanent Mitanni administrative centers that controlled crucial river crossings and vital trade routes, connecting Mesopotamia with Anatolia. The tactical innovations employed during these ambitious Assyrian campaigns reflected decades of continuous military evolution under skilled Indo-Aryan leadership, with Mitanni forces demonstrating unprecedented coordination between different specialized military units operating in perfect harmony. Elite chariot squadrons executed extraordinarily complex flanking maneuvers that effectively isolated Assyrian infantry formations from their support elements, while specialized assault troops equipped with scaling ladders and grappling equipment systematically breached urban fortifications that had previously been considered impregnable. The masterful integration of Hurrian infantry contingents with Indo-Aryan chariot elites created revolutionary combined arms formations that maximized the inherent strengths of both military traditions, while simultaneously minimizing their respective weaknesses and vulnerabilities. The successful capture of Arrapha, a crucial Assyrian stronghold controlling strategic access to the Zagros mountain passes, demonstrated Mitanni capabilities in sustained siege warfare that had previously been considered beyond the kingdom's military reach or logistical capacity. The prolonged siege lasted approximately 8 months, with Mitanni engineers constructing elaborate circumvallation works that prevented Assyrian relief expeditions from reaching the desperate defenders, while simultaneously maintaining secure supply lines for the attacking forces. Archaeological investigation of these impressive siege works reveals sophisticated engineering solutions, including comprehensive drainage systems, strategically positioned defensive positions, and well-organized supply depots that enabled Mitanni forces to maintain effective military pressure despite the extended duration of the complex operation. The profound psychological impact of these spectacular military victories extended far beyond their immediate strategic consequences, establishing Tushratta's reputation as the preeminent military leader of his generation throughout the ancient Near East. Diplomatic correspondence from Syrian city-states during this triumphant period reveals widespread recognition of Mitanni military supremacy, with local rulers voluntarily offering substantial tribute payments and military support in exchange for reliable protection against potential enemies, threatening their independence. These voluntary submissions dramatically expanded Mitanni influence across northern Syria without requiring additional costly military campaigns, demonstrating the kingdom's successful transition from conquest-based expansion to influence-based hegemony that maximized political control while minimizing military expenditure. The maintenance of Syrian territories under Tushratta's rule involved sophisticated administrative arrangements that carefully balanced central control with local autonomy, creating stable political relationships that endured for decades without significant rebellions or uprisings. Mitanni governors appointed to major Syrian cities typically came from established Hurrian administrative families with extensive experience in managing diverse populations and complex political relationships. Meanwhile, local rulers retained authority over internal affairs in exchange for regular tribute payments and military obligations that supported Mitanni's strategic objectives. Archaeological evidence from Damascus and Aleppo reveals the construction of Mitanni administrative compounds featuring standardized architectural elements, secure communication facilities, and residential quarters for permanent diplomatic staff responsible for maintaining political relationships. The extensive diplomatic correspondence between Tushratta and the Egyptian pharaohs Amenhotep III and Akhenaten provides unprecedented insights into the sophisticated court culture that flourished at Wasukani during this remarkable Golden Age period. These invaluable letters, preserved in the Amarna archive, reveal a level of cultural refinement and intellectual sophistication that rivaled the greatest courts of the ancient world during this era. Tushratta's correspondence demonstrates complete mastery of diplomatic protocol, literary expression, and complex political analysis that reflects extensive education in multiple languages, legal traditions, and international customs governing relationships between sovereign powers. The Mitanni court's cultural sophistication manifested itself through elaborate ceremonial procedures that skillfully incorporated elements from various ancient Near Eastern traditions, while maintaining distinctly Hurrian characteristics that preserved the kingdom's cultural identity. Royal audiences featured carefully choreographed presentations that displayed the kingdom's wealth through the strategic use of precious materials, exotic animals, and elaborate costumes that demonstrated Mitanni connections to extensive trade networks spanning from the Aegean Sea to the Iranian plateau. Foreign ambassadors consistently reported their amazement at the splendor of Mitanni court ceremonies, with Egyptian diplomatic records describing throne room decorations that included gold-plated furniture, silk wall hangings, and precious stone inlays that created dazzling visual displays designed to impress international visitors. The development of Mitanni literary culture during Tushratta's reign produced sophisticated works in both Hurrian and Akkadian languages that significantly influenced intellectual development throughout the region. Royal scribes composed epic poems celebrating Mitanni military victories, comprehensive legal treatises codifying administrative procedures, and religious texts that synthesized various theological traditions from different cultural backgrounds. Archaeological discoveries at scribal schools in major Mitanni cities reveal extensive libraries containing works on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and engineering that demonstrate the kingdom's commitment to intellectual advancement alongside military and political achievements that defined this golden age. Economic prosperity that characterized Tushratta's reign resulted from the successful integration of agricultural production, commercial taxation, and tribute collection into a comprehensive fiscal system that generated unprecedented government revenues supporting ambitious construction projects. The fertile Habba Valley produced massive grain surpluses that supported urban populations while providing export commodities for international trade relationships with distant markets. Expanded irrigation networks increased cultivated area by an estimated 30% compared to previous periods, while archaeological surveys of Mitanni agricultural installations reveal sophisticated water management systems, including reservoirs, distribution channels, and drainage networks that maximized agricultural productivity while preventing soil degradation and salinization problems. Commercial taxation provided another crucial revenue stream that reflected the kingdom's strategic position astride major trade routes connecting Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and the Levant. Mitanni customs posts processed caravans carrying tin from Anatolian mines, copper from Cyprus, silver from the Zagros Mountains, and luxury goods from as far away as India and Central Asia. The standardization of weights, measures, and currency systems throughout Mitanni territory facilitated long-distance commerce while ensuring consistent tax collection that contributed substantially to royal treasuries supporting government operations. The tribute relationships established with Syrian vassal states generated additional revenues that enabled Tushratta to finance ambitious construction projects and maintain large military forces without imposing excessive taxation on core Mitanni territories. These tributary arrangements typically involved annual payments of precious metals, luxury goods, and specialized products that reflected each region's particular economic strengths and available resources. Archaeological evidence from tribute collection centers reveals sophisticated accounting systems that tracked payments from individual vassal states while maintaining detailed records of military obligations and commercial privileges granted to loyal allies. Luxury goods production within Mitanni territory reached unprecedented levels of sophistication during this period, with royal workshops producing jewelry, textiles, and decorative objects that rivaled the finest products of contemporary civilizations. Mitanni goldsmiths developed advanced techniques for creating intricate filigree work, while textile producers experimented with imported silk fibers and exotic dyes that created fabrics of exceptional quality and beauty, highly prized throughout the ancient world. Archaeological discoveries of workshop areas reveal specialized tools, raw materials, and finished products that demonstrate the kingdom's technological capabilities and artistic achievements during this cultural renaissance period. The monumental architecture undertaken during Tushratta's reign transformed the physical landscape of major Mitanni cities, creating impressive urban environments that reflected the kingdom's wealth and cultural sophistication. The expansion of Wasukani included the construction of massive palace complexes featuring throne rooms capable of accommodating hundreds of courtiers, residential quarters for royal family members and high-ranking officials, and specialized facilities for diplomatic receptions and ceremonial functions. Archaeological investigation of these structures reveals construction techniques that combine traditional Mesopotamian building methods with architectural innovations that improved structural stability and aesthetic appeal, while incorporating elements from various cultural traditions. Religious architecture also flourished during this period, with the construction of elaborate temple complexes dedicated to major Hurrian deities that served as centers for both worship and community activities. The Great Temple of Teshub at Washukani, known from later Assyrian descriptions, featured a massive ziggurat-style tower surrounded by courtyards, administrative buildings, and residential quarters for priestly personnel. Archaeological evidence from similar temple complexes at other Mitanni sites reveals sophisticated architectural planning that integrated religious functions with economic activities, including craft production, agricultural processing, and commercial storage that supported temple operations. Tushratta's extensive diplomatic correspondence includes remarkably detailed discussions of commercial treaties that establish standardized procedures for dispute resolution, currency exchange, and the comprehensive protection of foreign merchants operating within Mitanni territory. These sophisticated arrangements created stable frameworks for long-distance commerce that contributed significantly to economic prosperity throughout the region, demonstrating the kingdom's commitment to maintaining peaceful international relationships that benefited all participating parties. The religious and cultural developments that occurred during Tushratta's remarkable reign reflected the cosmopolitan nature of Mitanni society and its distinctive openness to influences from diverse sources throughout the ancient Near East. The prominence of traditional Hurrian deities such as Teshub and Hepart within the royal pantheon provided essential continuity with established religious practices, while simultaneously accommodating Indo-Aryan divine figures and Syrian local deities that reflected the kingdom's diverse population and complex cultural heritage. Archaeological evidence from religious sites reveals syncretic practices that skillfully combined elements from multiple theological traditions into coherent religious systems that served the spiritual needs of multi-ethnic communities throughout the expanding empire. The worship of Teshub, the powerful Hurrian storm god, reached particular prominence during this golden period as royal patronage supported the construction of magnificent temples and the development of elaborate ritual practices that enhanced the deity's importance. Teshub's dual role as both weather deity and divine warrior made him particularly appealing to Mitanni rulers who actively sought divine sanction for their military campaigns and agricultural policies that sustained the kingdom's prosperity. Archaeological discoveries of religious artifacts reveal sophisticated iconographic programs that depicted Tishub in various aspects, from benevolent rainbringer to terrible destroyer of enemies, reflecting the complex theological concepts that characterized mature Hurrian religious thought and practice. The goddess Hepat, consort of Teshub and protector of royal families, received similar royal attention through the establishment of elaborate temples staffed by highly trained priestesses who performed elaborate ceremonies on behalf of the ruling dynasty. The cult of Hepat incorporated elements from various goddess traditions throughout the ancient Near East, creating syncretic religious practices that appealed to diverse populations within the Mitanni kingdom. Archaeological evidence from Hepat temples reveals sophisticated ritual equipment, including ceremonial vessels, musical instruments, and decorative objects that demonstrate the wealth and artistic sophistication devoted to religious activities during this cultural renaissance. The influence of Mitanni religious practices extended far beyond the kingdom's political boundaries, with Hurrian deities and ritual practices appearing in religious contexts throughout Syria, Anatolia, and even Egypt. This religious influence reflected the cultural prestige that Mitanni civilization had achieved during its golden age, as foreign courts adopted Mitanni religious elements alongside diplomatic and commercial relationships. The spread of Hurrian religious terminology and concepts throughout the region created lasting cultural legacies that persisted long after the kingdom's political decline and eventual collapse. The brutal assassination of Tushratta around 1320 BC shattered the carefully constructed political edifice that had sustained Mitanni's golden age, plunging the kingdom into a devastating succession crisis that would fundamentally alter the balance of power throughout the ancient Near East for generations. Contemporary Syrian chronicles describe the murder as occurring during a royal hunting expedition in the hills east of Wasukani, where Tushratta's own trusted bodyguards turned against him in a conspiracy that likely involved multiple court factions dissatisfied with his policies toward Egypt and Assyria. The king's body, according to these accounts, was discovered by shepherds 3 days after his disappearance, bearing multiple stab wounds that indicated a prolonged struggle before his death, suggesting that the assassination was not a swift execution, but a desperate fight for survival. The immediate aftermath of Tushratta's assassination revealed the deep factional divisions that had been festering beneath the surface of Mitanni court politics. Throughout the preceding decades of apparent prosperity and stability, 2 primary claimants emerged to contest the succession. Artatama, who claimed legitimacy through his descent from an earlier branch of the royal family, and Shutana III, Tushratta's designated heir, who commanded the loyalty of court officials and military commanders who had served under his father. Archaeological evidence from Wasukani suggests that the capital itself was physically divided between supporters of the rival claimants, with different quarters of the city controlled by armed factions that erected barricades and defensive positions to protect their territories from opposing forces. Artatama's supporters consisted primarily of nobles who had opposed Tushratta's pro-Egyptian policies and favored a more aggressive stance toward Assyrian expansion in the east. These faction members included veteran military commanders who had participated in earlier campaigns against Assyria, court officials who controlled access to royal treasuries, and provincial governors who commanded substantial military forces in outlying territories. Their political program emphasized traditional Mitanni independence from foreign alliances, while promising to restore the kingdom's military prestige through renewed conquests in Mesopotamia that would recapture lost territories. The resources controlled by Artatama's faction included several major provincial centers in eastern Mitanni territory, where local governors had declared their allegiance to his cause and began mobilizing military forces for the anticipated civil war. Archaeological surveys of sites such as Tel Leilan and Tel Mosen reveal evidence of hasty fortification construction during this period, with defensive earthworks and weapon caches that indicate systematic preparation for prolonged military conflict. These preparations included the stockpiling of bronze weapons, the construction of siege equipment, and the establishment of supply depots that could sustain military operations over extended periods of warfare. Shaitana III's faction drew its strength from different sources within Mitanni society, particularly the professional administrative class that had managed the kingdom's complex diplomatic relationships, and the younger generation of military officers who had risen to prominence during Tushratta's successful campaigns. These supporters controlled the central government apparatus in Wasukani, including the royal treasury, diplomatic archives, and communication networks that connected the capital to vassal states throughout Syria. Their political strategy focused on maintaining the Egyptian alliance while presenting themselves as the legitimate continuation of Tushratta's successful policies that had brought prosperity to the kingdom. The military forces available to Shaitana's faction included the elite chariot squadrons that had formed the core of Mitanni armies during the kingdom's period of greatest expansion and military success. These units, based primarily in the Kabul Valley region, possessed superior equipment and training compared to provincial forces, but their numbers were limited by the specialized nature of chariot warfare and the extensive resources required to maintain horse breeding programs. Archaeological evidence from military installations near Wasukani reveals weapons caches containing hundreds of bronze-tipped arrows, chariot components, and horse harnesses that indicate substantial preparation for mobile warfare operations. The devastating civil war that erupted between these rival factions completely destroyed the Mitanni kingdom's military capabilities and economic infrastructure, creating unprecedented opportunities for external enemies to exploit the kingdom's internal weakness and territorial vulnerability. Contemporary Hittite records describe raids launched against Mitanni territory while the rival claimants were engaged in fighting each other, with Hittite forces capturing several important border fortresses that had previously been considered impregnable. These Hittite successes encouraged other regional powers to test Mitanni defenses, creating a cascade of military pressures that further weakened the kingdom's strategic position throughout the region. The initial phases of the civil war centered on control of Wasukani itself, where street fighting between rival factions caused extensive damage to the capital's infrastructure and administrative facilities that had been built during the Golden Age. Archaeological excavations in the palace quarter revealed destruction layers containing burned administrative records, damaged storage facilities, and evidence of systematic looting that indicates the complete breakdown of central authority. The royal treasury appears to have been divided between the competing factions, with precious metals and luxury goods distributed to supporters as payment for continued loyalty during the crisis. During the uncertain succession period, provincial territories throughout the Mitanni kingdom declared allegiance to one faction or the other based on complex calculations that weighed local interests against broader strategic considerations. Eastern provinces, which faced direct pressure from Assyrian expansion, generally supported Artatama's promises of renewed military resistance, while Western territories that depended on trade relationships with Egyptian-controlled Syria favored Shaitana III's commitment to maintaining existing diplomatic arrangements. These regional divisions created a patchwork of competing authorities that made coordinated military action increasingly difficult for either claimant to achieve. The intervention of Sepulium al-Wa fundamentally altered the dynamics of the Mitanni succession crisis, transforming what had been an internal political dispute into a proxy conflict that served Hittite strategic interests throughout the region. The Hittite king's calculated decision to support Artatama reflected careful analysis of the relative strengths of the competing factions and recognition that a Mitanni ruler dependent on Hittite military support would be more amenable to Anatolian interests than a legitimate heir with independent power bases. This catastrophic period marked the end of Mitanni's golden age and the beginning of its decline as a major power in ancient Near Eastern politics, setting the stage for the kingdom's eventual absorption into the expanding Assyrian Empire. The devastating psychological impact of Hittite intervention proved equally significant as its immediate military effects, as Mitanni nobles throughout the kingdom began seriously questioning whether either claimant possessed sufficient strength to maintain the kingdom's independence against mounting external pressures from multiple directions. Diplomatic correspondence from Syrian vassal states during this chaotic period reveals growing uncertainty about Mitanni's ability to provide effective protection with local rulers beginning to explore alternative alliance arrangements that might offer greater security for their territories and populations. These diplomatic shifts severely weakened both Mitanni factions by dramatically reducing their access to tribute revenues and military support from Syrian territories that had previously formed the backbone of the kingdom's power and prosperity. Suppiliulioma's strategic objectives extended far beyond simply installing a compliant ruler in Washukani to encompass the systematic dismantling of Mitanni's capacity for independent military action throughout the region. Hittite forces systematically captured key fortified positions that controlled access routes between different parts of the Mitanni kingdom, preventing effective coordination between provincial armies and the central government that might have enabled organized resistance. The occupation of these strategic points created permanent Hittite military presence within traditional Mitanni territory, establishing facts on the ground that would persist regardless of which claimant ultimately achieved formal recognition as king of the diminished realm. The prolonged siege of Carchemish represented the most significant Hittite military achievement during this intervention, as the capture of this crucial commercial center provided direct access to Syrian trade networks, while demonstrating Hittite capability to project power far from Anatolian bases with devastating effectiveness. The city's strategic location at the confluence of major trade routes made its control absolutely essential for any power seeking to dominate northern Syria and the profitable commerce that flowed through the region. While its massive fortifications had previously been considered among the strongest defensive positions in the ancient Near East, archaeological investigation of Carchemish reveals evidence of systematic siege operations that included the construction of earthwork ramps, the deployment of battering rams, and coordinated assaults that eventually breached the city's supposedly impregnable defenses. The catastrophic fall of Carchemish sent shockwaves throughout the region as rulers and merchants suddenly recognized that traditional assumptions about defensive capabilities and strategic balances no longer applied to the new military realities. Hittite control of the city provided direct access to Mediterranean trade networks, while simultaneously cutting crucial supply lines that had sustained Mitanni influence in western Syria for generations. The economic implications of this devastating loss extended far beyond immediate military considerations, as Carchemish had served as a major collection point for tribute payments from Syrian vassal states and a distribution center for luxury goods that demonstrated Mitanni wealth and power to international observers. Aleppo's subsequent capitulation to Hittite forces completed the systematic dismantling of Mitanni's western territorial holdings, as local rulers calculated that resistance would be futile, given the demonstrated effectiveness of Suppiliulioma's military machine and its ability to overcome even the strongest fortifications. The city's surrender negotiations, preserved in Hittite diplomatic archives, reveal the comprehensive nature of arrangements that transferred control over not only urban centers, but also surrounding agricultural territories, trade routes, and tributary relationships. These agreements established direct Hittite administration over territories that had been under Mitanni influence for over a century, representing a fundamental shift in regional power structures that would reshape ancient Near Eastern politics. The Egyptian response to these dramatic developments revealed the severe limitations of pharaonic commitment to the Mitanni alliance when confronted with changing strategic realities that threatened Egyptian interests. Amenhotep III, who had recently assumed power in Egypt and was preoccupied with religious reforms and internal political changes, proved reluctant to commit substantial military resources to supporting either Mitanni claimant against determined Hittite intervention. Egyptian diplomatic archives from this period describe lengthy court debates about the costs and benefits of military involvement in Mesopotamian affairs, with many officials arguing that Egyptian interests would be better served by accommodating Hittite expansion rather than opposing it through costly military campaigns. The Egyptian decision to abandon active support for Mitanni represented a calculated assessment that the kingdom's internal divisions and external pressures had rendered it an unreliable ally whose continued independence could not be assured regardless of Egyptian military assistance. Pharaonic strategic planners recognized that Hittite control over northern Syria was becoming inevitable and began exploring diplomatic arrangements that would protect Egyptian interests in Palestine and southern Syria while accepting Anatolian dominance in northern territories. These policy shifts reflected pragmatic recognition that the regional balance of power had shifted decisively in favor of Hittite expansion, making resistance futile and potentially counterproductive. The diplomatic isolation that resulted from Egyptian abandonment left both Mitanni claimants increasingly dependent on external support for their survival, creating conditions that facilitated foreign intervention in the kingdom's internal affairs. Al-Tatama's reliance on Hittite military assistance transformed him from an independent ruler into essentially a Hittite vassal whose authority derived from Anatolian support rather than legitimate claim to the throne through traditional succession practices. This dependency relationship established patterns of foreign control that would characterize Mitanni politics for the remainder of the kingdom's existence as an independent entity. Shatana the Seed's position became increasingly untenable as Hittite military successes systematically eliminated his territorial base and reduced his access to resources necessary for continued resistance against overwhelming odds. Archaeological evidence from sites that remained under his control reveals signs of severe economic deterioration, including reduced construction activity, simplified pottery production, and evidence of population decline that indicate the devastating impact of prolonged civil war on civilian populations. These deteriorating conditions made it increasingly difficult for Shatana to maintain the loyalty of his supporters, who faced growing pressure to accept Hittite-sponsored settlement terms that might preserve their lives and property. The transformation of Mitanni from an independent regional power into a Hittite client state represented one of the most significant geopolitical changes in ancient Near Eastern history during the turbulent 14th century BC. This transition involved not only dramatic changes in political leadership, but also fundamental alterations in administrative structures, military organization, and economic relationships that would reshape the kingdom's character for generations to come. The installation of Artatama as a Hittite-sponsored ruler established dangerous precedents for foreign intervention in Mitanni affairs that would persist throughout the kingdom's remaining history as a shadow of its former glory. The territorial losses suffered during the succession crisis permanently reduced Mitanni's strategic capabilities and economic resources, creating a weakened kingdom that could no longer compete effectively with its regional rivals for influence or territory. The loss of Syrian territories eliminated crucial sources of tribute revenue while reducing the kingdom's access to Mediterranean trade networks that had provided luxury goods and exotic materials essential for maintaining royal prestige. These severe economic constraints limited Mitanni's ability to maintain large military forces or undertake ambitious construction projects that had characterized the kingdom during its golden age under Tushratta's enlightened rule. The installation of Shatuwazza as king of Mitanni around 1300 BC marked the beginning of a fundamentally different chapter in the kingdom's history, as the new ruler's authority derived not from traditional legitimacy or popular support, but from Hittite military backing and formal recognition by Suppiluliuma Itti. The treaty that established this arrangement, preserved in cuneiform tablets from Bogasco, reveals the comprehensive nature of Mitanni's subordination to Hittite interests, with detailed clauses specifying tribute obligations, military support requirements, and territorial concessions that reduced the once mighty kingdom to a buffer state serving Anatolian strategic priorities. Shatiwazza's coronation ceremony, conducted according to traditional Hurrian protocols, but overseen by Hittite officials, symbolized this uncomfortable fusion of indigenous customs with foreign oversight that would characterize Mitanni governance throughout this period of vassalage. The reduced territorial extent of the Mitanni kingdom under Hittite suzerainty encompassed primarily the core regions of the Kabul River Valley, with eastern boundaries that fluctuated according to Assyrian military pressure and western frontiers that remained under direct Hittite administration. Archaeological surveys of former Mitanni territories reveal the systematic dismantling of administrative installations that had previously coordinated provincial governance, with many sites showing evidence of deliberate destruction followed by abandonment rather than reconstruction under new management. The capital at Wasakani retained its ceremonial importance, but lost much of its practical administrative function, as key decisions affecting Mitanni territories were increasingly made in consultation with Hittite advisors or referred directly to the Anatolian court for resolution. Shatiwaz's early attempts to assert independent authority within these severely constrained circumstances demonstrated both the limitations of his position and his determination to preserve some measure of Mitanni autonomy. His efforts to rebuild the kingdom's military capabilities focused on reconstructing chariot squadrons that had been decimated during the succession crisis, though these forces remained small in comparison to the armies that had served previous Mitanni rulers. Archaeological evidence from military installations near Wasakani reveals the construction of new stabling facilities and training grounds, but the scale of these projects reflects the reduced resources available to the vassal kingdom compared to its predecessors' extensive military infrastructure that had once dominated the ancient Near East. The crushing tribute obligations imposed by the Hittite suzerainty treaty placed devastating strains on Mitanni's already weakened economy, requiring annual payments of precious metals, luxury goods, and military equipment that represented substantial portions of the kingdom's total production capacity. Hittite administrative records provide detailed descriptions of tribute deliveries that included exquisite gold jewelry, ornate silver vessels, fine textiles, expertly trained horses, and superior bronze weapons that demonstrated continuing Mitanni craftsmanship, while simultaneously depleting the kingdom's accumulated wealth and resources. These excessive tribute requirements forced Mitanni administrators to develop far more efficient taxation systems that extracted resources from agricultural and commercial activities with unprecedented intensity, creating severe economic pressures that affected all levels of society throughout the diminished kingdom. The agricultural foundation of Mitanni's economy underwent significant reorganization as administrators desperately sought to maximize production within the kingdom's dramatically reduced territorial boundaries. Irrigation systems in the Kabul Valley received renewed attention and substantial investment, with canal networks expanded and improved to increase cultivated area and crop yields that could support both the population and tribute obligations. Archaeological investigation of these irrigation works reveals sophisticated engineering solutions that maximize water distribution efficiency while minimizing maintenance requirements, indicating continued technological capability despite political subordination to foreign powers. However, the increased agricultural output served primarily to meet tribute obligations rather than improve living conditions for the general population suffering under these economic burdens. Commercial activities within Mitanni territory faced new restrictions and taxation burdens that reflected the kingdom's subordinate status within the Hittite sphere of influence throughout the region. Merchants traveling through Mitanni territories encountered multiple taxation points where Hittite officials collected customs duties alongside traditional Mitanni levies, creating cost burdens that reduced the profitability of long-distance trade relationships. Archaeological evidence from trading posts along major caravan routes reveals the construction of additional administrative facilities designed to process and tax commercial traffic more thoroughly, while the volume of luxury goods found in archaeological contexts suggests significantly reduced commercial activity compared to earlier prosperous periods. The gradual erosion of Mitanni territorial control began almost immediately after Shatuwaz's installation, as neighboring powers recognized the kingdom's weakened condition and began systematically testing its defensive capabilities. Assyrian forces under Adad-nirari launched systematic campaigns against Mitanni's eastern provinces, employing devastating siege warfare techniques that proved overwhelmingly effective against fortifications that had been designed to resist chariot attacks rather than prolonged infantry assaults. The catastrophic fall of key border fortresses such as Taidu and Kahat provided Assyrian forces with forward bases for continued expansion, while demonstrating the inadequacy of Mitanni defensive preparations against modern siege warfare techniques. The Assyrian military machine that confronted Mitanni during this period had evolved significantly from earlier encounters, incorporating valuable lessons learned from decades of warfare against various regional opponents throughout Mesopotamia. Assyrian armies featured heavily armored infantry formations equipped with superior iron weapons that provided substantial advantages over bronze-armed defenders, while their siege trains included sophisticated equipment capable of breaching even the strongest contemporary fortifications. Archaeological excavations at sites captured during Assyrian campaigns reveal evidence of systematic siege operations that included the construction of earthwork ramps, deployment of battering rams, and coordinated assaults that eventually overwhelmed defensive positions that had previously been considered impregnable. Adad-Nirari's strategic approach to Mitanni conquest emphasized the systematic occupation of agricultural territories that supported enemy military forces rather than focusing exclusively on capturing fortified urban centers. Assyrian forces deliberately destroyed irrigation systems, burned grain storage facilities, and disrupted agricultural cycles in ways that made it impossible for Mitanni administrators to support large military formations in contested regions. This economic warfare proved particularly effective against a kingdom that depended heavily on agricultural surpluses to maintain its political and military structure, creating cascading effects that weakened Mitanni resistance throughout the eastern provinces. The capture of Arrapha by Assyrian forces represented a particularly devastating loss for Mitanni, as this strategic fortress controlled access to trade routes connecting Mesopotamia with the Iranian plateau. The city's massive fortifications, which had withstood previous Assyrian attacks, finally succumbed to systematic siege operations that lasted over 6 months and involved the construction of elaborate circumvallation works that prevented relief expeditions from reaching the desperate defenders. Archaeological investigation of the siege works reveals sophisticated engineering solutions, including drainage systems, defensive positions, and supply depots that enabled Assyrian forces to maintain effective military pressure despite the extended duration of the operation. The profound psychological impact of these Assyrian victories extended far beyond their immediate strategic consequences, as Mitanni provincial governors and local administrators began questioning whether continued resistance served their interests better than accommodation with the expanding Assyrian kingdom. Diplomatic correspondence from this period reveals growing numbers of Mitanni officials who initiated secret negotiations with Assyrian representatives, offering to surrender their territories in exchange for favorable treatment under Assyrian administration. These treacherous defections created intelligence advantages for Assyrian forces while undermining Mitanni defensive coordination throughout the contested regions, accelerating the kingdom's territorial collapse. Shatiwaz's responses to these territorial losses demonstrated both his determination to preserve Mitanni independence and his realistic recognition of the kingdom's limited capabilities for effective resistance against overwhelming odds. His diplomatic initiatives focused on securing external support that might offset Assyrian military advantages, with particular attention to potential alliances with powers that shared interests in containing Assyrian expansion. The king's correspondence with Egyptian representatives explored possibilities for renewed military cooperation, though these discussions ultimately proved fruitless due to Egypt's preoccupation with internal political developments and reluctance to become involved in distant Mesopotamian conflicts. The most promising avenue for external support appeared to lie in renewed relationships with Hittite authorities, who had their own strategic reasons for opposing unlimited Assyrian expansion in regions that bordered Anatolian territories. Shatiwaz's negotiations with Hittite officials sought to transform the existing suzerainty arrangement into a more active military alliance that would provide effective protection against relentless Assyrian advances. These discussions reveal the complex dynamics of vassal relationships in the ancient Near East, where subordinate rulers could sometimes leverage their overlord's strategic interests to secure support for their own survival against external threats. However, Hittite responses to Mitanni requests for military assistance remained disappointingly limited and conditional, reflecting the Anatolian kingdom's own strategic priorities and resource constraints. Hittite military forces were committed to campaigns in western Anatolia and northern Syria that took precedence over defending distant Mesopotamian territories, while Hittite administrators calculated that Mitanni survival was less important than maintaining good relationships with other regional powers. The military support that Hittite authorities did provide consisted primarily of small contingents of specialized troops and limited quantities of advanced weapons, rather than the large-scale intervention that Mitanni's desperate situation required for survival. The administrative challenges facing Shatiwaz's government multiplied dramatically as territorial losses reduced the kingdom's tax base, while tribute obligations to Hittite overlords remained constant. Mitanni officials developed increasingly sophisticated methods for extracting resources from remaining territories, including new taxation categories that targeted commercial activities, craft production, and even subsistence agriculture in ways that had been considered excessive during earlier periods. Archaeological evidence from administrative centers reveals the expansion of bureaucratic facilities designed to track and collect these various taxation streams, while legal documents describe disputes arising from the increased fiscal burdens imposed on civilian populations struggling to survive. The cultural impact of political subordination manifested itself through gradual changes in artistic expression, religious practices, and social customs that reflected Mitanni society's adaptation to its reduced circumstances and diminished expectations. Royal patronage of artistic production declined significantly due to severe resource constraints, resulting in simplified decorative programs and reduced use of precious materials in ceremonial objects. Archaeological discoveries from palace contexts reveal a shift toward more modest artistic expression that emphasized traditional Hurrian motifs, while incorporating elements borrowed from Hittite and Assyrian cultural traditions, reflecting the kingdom's changing political relationships. Religious practices underwent subtle but significant modifications, as Mitanni priests adapted traditional ceremonies to accommodate the kingdom's changed political status and reduced circumstances. The worship of Teshub, the Hurrian storm god who had served as patron deity of Mitanni military campaigns, incorporated new ritual elements that emphasized protection and survival rather than conquest and expansion. Archaeological evidence from temple sites reveals changes in votive offerings and ceremonial equipment that reflect these shifting religious emphases, with increased attention to defensive deities and reduced emphasis on martial aspects of divine worship that no longer serve the kingdom's needs. The preservation of Hurrian cultural identity became an increasingly conscious priority for Mitanni administrators, who recognized that political independence might be lost, but cultural distinctiveness could potentially survive foreign domination. Educational programs in major urban centers emphasized instruction in Hurrian language and literature, while craftsmen received encouragement to maintain traditional production techniques even when foreign markets preferred different styles. Thus ended the remarkable story of the Mitanni Empire, a kingdom that rose from the ashes of political fragmentation to dominate the ancient Near East, before falling victim to internal divisions and external pressures. Yet their legacy lived on through the cultural innovations, military techniques, and diplomatic traditions that influenced civilization for centuries to come, proving that true power lies not just in conquest, but in the ideas and innovations that outlast even the mightiest empires. These cultural preservation efforts created mounting tensions between practical adaptation to harsh political realities and idealistic commitment to maintaining ancestral traditions that defined Hurrian identity. Shalmaneser's succession to the Assyrian throne around 1274 BC brought devastating renewed military pressure against remaining Mitanni territories, as the new king ambitiously sought to complete the conquest of regions that had remained under nominal Mitanni control despite previous Assyrian advances throughout the region. Shalmaneser's military campaigns employed far more systematic approaches to territorial occupation than his predecessors had utilized, with Assyrian forces establishing permanent administrative installations in conquered regions, while implementing comprehensive population transfer policies that reduced the likelihood of future rebellions against Assyrian authority. Archaeological evidence from sites conquered during this final period reveals the construction of distinctly Assyrian administrative buildings alongside the systematic destruction of Mitanni governmental facilities that had served the kingdom for generations. The prolonged siege of Wasakani itself, undertaken by Shalmaneser's forces around 1270 BC, represented the ultimate test of Mitanni's capacity for independent survival under Shatiwaz's increasingly desperate leadership. The capital's defenses, which had been systematically strengthened during the early years of Shatiwaz's reign, proved tragically inadequate against Assyrian siege techniques that had been refined through decades of successful campaigns across Mesopotamia. The methodical approach employed by experienced Assyrian engineers included the construction of massive siege ramps, deployment of powerful battering rams, and coordinated assaults that gradually wore down defensive capabilities while preventing any effective relief operations from reaching the besieged city. The eventual fall of Wasukani marked the effective end of Mitanni as an independent political entity in ancient Near Eastern history, though Shatiwaza managed to escape the city's capture and continued resistance from strongholds in the western regions of his diminished kingdom. Archaeological excavations in the palace quarter reveal extensive destruction that indicates systematic looting and deliberate demolition of governmental facilities. Meanwhile, residential areas show clear evidence of population displacement and economic disruption that characterized the transition to Assyrian administration throughout the conquered territories. The royal archives, which had preserved centuries of invaluable diplomatic correspondence and administrative records, were scattered and largely destroyed during the city's capture, representing an irreplaceable loss to historical knowledge. The final phase of Mitanni resistance centered on remaining fortified positions throughout the Kabur Valley, where Shatiwaza and his loyal supporters attempted to maintain control over agricultural territories that could support continued military operations against overwhelming odds. These desperate defensive efforts relied increasingly on guerrilla tactics that avoided direct confrontation with superior Assyrian forces while disrupting enemy supply lines and communication networks wherever possible. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals the construction of hidden supply caches, concealed defensive positions, and sophisticated communication systems that enabled coordinated resistance activities across multiple locations, despite Assyrian efforts to eliminate organized opposition. The gradual absorption of remaining Mitanni territories into the Assyrian administrative system proceeded through a calculated combination of military conquest and diplomatic negotiation that reflected Assyrian recognition of the practical challenges involved in governing diverse populations across vast distances. Local administrators, who demonstrated willingness to cooperate with Assyrian authorities, often retained positions within the new governmental structure, while those who continued resistance faced systematic elimination and replacement with loyal Assyrian appointees. These transition processes created hybrid administrative arrangements that preserved some elements of traditional Hurrian governance while implementing Assyrian legal and fiscal systems throughout the conquered territories. The cultural legacy of Mitanni's Golden Age persisted in various forms, despite the kingdom's political destruction, as Hurrian religious practices, artistic traditions, and technological innovations continue to influence developments throughout the region for centuries. Former Mitanni territories retained distinctive cultural characteristics that distinguished them from core Assyrian regions, while refugee populations carried Hurrian traditions to new locations where they merged with local customs to create syncretic cultural forms. The preservation of Hurrian language in religious and legal contexts ensured that key elements of Mitanni civilization survived the kingdom's political collapse. The systematic dismantling of Mitanni's remaining strongholds accelerated dramatically under Shalmaneser's methodical campaign strategy, which prioritized the permanent elimination of Hurrian political authority rather than mere territorial occupation. Archaeological excavations at Tel Hamidia reveal the sophisticated siege works constructed by Assyrian engineers during their assault on this crucial Kabur Valley fortress, including massive earthen ramps that enabled battering rams to reach previously impregnable wall sections and elaborate tunnel systems designed to undermine defensive foundations. The fortress walls, constructed from massive limestone blocks quarried from nearby hills, showed evidence of systematic bombardment by stone-throwing engines that created breaches large enough for coordinated infantry assaults. The capture of Tel Hamidia provided Assyrian forces with a strategic base for operations throughout the central Kabur region, where several smaller Mitanni strongholds continued to resist under local commanders who had refused to acknowledge Assyrian authority. These secondary fortifications, typically built on natural hills and reinforced with mud brick walls, lacked the sophisticated defensive features of major urban centers, but compensated through their positions overlooking crucial agricultural territories and water sources. Assyrian military records describe the systematic reduction of these positions through coordinated campaigns that combined direct assault with economic warfare designed to starve defenders into submission. The siege of Durkat Limu demonstrated the evolution of Assyrian military engineering capabilities as attacking forces constructed elaborate siege works that included multiple parallel trenches, wooden siege towers reaching heights of over 20 meters, and specialized assault bridges that could be deployed across defensive ditches. The defenders, commanded by a Mitanni noble named Shedi-Teshub, according to fragmentary cuneiform sources, had prepared extensive countermeasures, including underground passages for launching surprise attacks against siege works and stockpiled supplies sufficient for extended resistance. Archaeological investigation of the siege perimeter reveals evidence of intense combat, with thousands of bronze and iron arrowheads scattered across the battlefield alongside fragments of siege equipment and defensive installations. The profound psychological impact of these systematic conquests extended far beyond their immediate military significance, as surviving Mitanni administrators throughout the region recognized that continued resistance would result in complete destruction rather than negotiated surrender. Intelligence reports preserved in Assyrian archives describe the voluntary submission of numerous fortified positions, whose commanders calculated that cooperation offered better prospects for personal survival than futile military resistance. These capitulations typically involved formal ceremonies where Mitanni nobles publicly acknowledged Assyrian sovereignty while receiving guarantees of personal safety and retention of local administrative positions under the new imperial system. Shalmaneser's campaign against the fortified city of Sagaratum revealed the comprehensive nature of Assyrian conquest procedures, which extended beyond military occupation to encompass systematic documentation of captured resources and population transfers designed to prevent future rebellions. The city's massive granaries, capable of storing grain supplies for thousands of inhabitants, were methodically emptied and their contents transported to Assyrian supply depots, while skilled craftsmen identified during the occupation were relocated to Assyrian cities where their expertise could serve imperial production requirements. Archaeological evidence from residential quarters indicates selective demolition of buildings associated with Mitanni administrative functions, while structures suitable for Assyrian governmental purposes were preserved and modified according to imperial architectural standards. The final assault on Roshakani itself represented the culmination of Shalmaneser's systematic campaign to eliminate Mitanni political authority throughout the Kabul region. The capital's defences, which had been continuously strengthened since Shatiwaza's installation as king, featured multiple concentric walls constructed from fired brick and reinforced with bronze fittings that provided exceptional resistance to conventional siege equipment. Assyrian engineers responded by constructing the largest siege works documented in contemporary military records, including earthen ramps that required thousands of workers labouring for months to complete, and specialized siege engines capable of launching projectiles weighing over 100 kilograms against defensive installations. The systematic destruction of Wasukani's administrative quarter eliminated the physical infrastructure that had sustained Mitanni governmental operations for over 2 centuries. Archaeological excavations reveal the deliberate demolition of the royal palace complex, where throne rooms decorated with precious metal inlays were stripped of valuable materials before the buildings were burned and their foundations covered with rubble. The royal archives, containing diplomatic correspondence and administrative records that documented Mitanni's interactions with regional powers, were scattered throughout the destruction debris, with many tablets showing evidence of deliberate breakage that suggests systematic efforts to eliminate historical records of Mitanni independence. The capture of the Great Temple of Teshub within Wasukani's religious quarter demonstrated Assyrian recognition of the symbolic importance of eliminating Hurrian religious authority alongside political institutions. The temple's massive ziggurat, constructed from millions of mud bricks and featuring elaborate decorative programs celebrating Hurrian deities, was systematically dismantled with its materials transported for use in Assyrian construction projects. The temple's extensive treasure chambers yielded thousands of precious objects, including gold jewelry, silver vessels, and ceremonial weapons that were incorporated into Assyrian royal collections or redistributed as rewards for military service. Population deportations from conquered Mitanni territories followed established Assyrian procedures designed to eliminate potential centers of resistance while providing skilled labor for imperial projects throughout Mesopotamia. Contemporary Assyrian administrative records describe the systematic identification and relocation of specific population categories, including skilled craftsmen, experienced administrators, and members of the former ruling elite who possessed knowledge valuable to imperial governance. Thus ended one of history's most remarkable civilizations, the Mitanni Empire, that had risen from political chaos to dominate the ancient world, only to fall victim to the very forces of change and conquest that it had once mastered. Yet in its destruction lay the seeds of its immortality, as the innovations, traditions, and cultural achievements of this extraordinary kingdom would influence human civilization for millennia to come. These forced relocations systematically involved the brutal separation of entire families and the deliberate dispersal of connected individuals across distant regions to completely prevent the formation of exile communities that might potentially organize future uprisings against Assyrian authority. The strategic relocation of skilled Hurrian metalworkers to specialized Assyrian production centers throughout the Tigris Valley provided the expanding empire with invaluable access to revolutionary bronze-working techniques that had been meticulously developed in Mitanni workshops over countless generations of master craftsmen. Archaeological evidence recovered from Assyrian metalwork sites reveals the sudden emergence of remarkably sophisticated alloying methods and intricate decorative techniques that correspond precisely chronologically with the brutal conquest of Mitanni territories throughout the region. These crucial technological transfers dramatically enhanced Assyrian military capabilities through vastly improved weapon production, while simultaneously contributing to the development of exquisite luxury goods that demonstrated imperial wealth and cultural sophistication to international observers. Agricultural experts forcibly deported from the incredibly fertile Kabul Valley brought in valuable expertise in advanced irrigation management and specialized crop cultivation that proved absolutely essential for expanding agricultural production throughout core Assyrian territories. The remarkably sophisticated water management systems originally developed in Mitanni territories, including elaborate canal networks that maximize distribution efficiency while preventing devastating soil salinization, were carefully replicated in ambitious Assyrian agricultural projects under the direct supervision of relocated Hurrian engineers and specialists. These vital knowledge transfers contributed significantly to increased agricultural productivity that effectively supported rapidly growing urban populations and massively expanded military forces throughout the entire Assyrian Empire for generations. The methodical destruction of Mitanni's urban infrastructure extended far beyond military targets to encompass crucial commercial and residential facilities that had supported the kingdom's economic foundation for centuries. Archaeological surveys of major Mitanni cities reveal widespread evidence of deliberate demolition that systematically eliminated marketplaces, workshops, and storage facilities, absolutely essential for regional economic activity. The devastating destruction of these commercial installations severely disrupted established trade networks that had connected Anatolia, Syria, and Mesopotamia for centuries, forcing merchants to develop entirely alternative routes that bypassed former Mitanni territories and dramatically reduced the economic importance of the Kabul Valley region. Tukulti-Ninurta's succession to the Assyrian throne around 1243 BC brought renewed intensity to campaigns against remaining pockets of determined Mitanni resistance in remote regions of the kingdom's former territory. The new king's military strategy emphasized the complete elimination of Hurrian political structures through coordinated operations that combined large-scale military assaults with systematic administrative reorganization of conquered territories. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals the construction of permanent Assyrian military installations at strategic locations throughout former Mitanni territory, indicating imperial commitment to maintaining long-term control over these regions through sustained military presence. The Siege of Harran, one of the last major urban centers to maintain nominal independence under Mitanni authority, demonstrated the technological superiority that Assyrian forces had achieved through decades of military innovation and conquest experience throughout Mesopotamia. The city's ancient walls, constructed during earlier periods and reinforced with traditional Mesopotamian defensive techniques, proved utterly inadequate against Assyrian siege equipment that included iron-reinforced battering rams, torsion artillery, capable of launching heavy projectiles over long distances, and specialized assault ladders designed for rapid scaling of defensive walls. The systematic approach employed by experienced Assyrian engineers included the construction of multiple siege camps that enabled coordinated attacks from different directions, while maintaining secure supply lines to support extended operations against stubborn defenders. The cultural destruction that accompanied these final military campaigns extended far beyond physical demolition to encompass systematic efforts to eliminate Hurrian religious practices and cultural traditions that might serve as focal points for future resistance movements against imperial authority. Assyrian administrators implemented harsh policies that prohibited the use of Hurrian language in official contexts, while requiring the adoption of Assyrian religious practices and cultural customs throughout conquered territories. Archaeological evidence from religious sites reveals the deliberate destruction of Hurrian cult objects and the replacement of traditional religious installations with facilities dedicated to Assyrian deities and imperial worship practices. The transformation of former Mitanni territories into standard Assyrian provinces involved comprehensive administrative reorganization that eliminated traditional governmental structures, while implementing imperial bureaucratic systems designed to maximize resource extraction. Assyrian governors appointed to administer these regions typically came from established administrative families with extensive experience in managing diverse populations, while local officials who demonstrated loyalty to the new imperial system could retain subordinate positions within the reorganized governmental hierarchy. Archaeological evidence from administrative centers reveals the construction of standardized governmental facilities that followed Assyrian architectural patterns while incorporating practical adaptations to local environmental conditions and geographic constraints. The economic integration of former Mitanni territories into the Assyrian imperial system required substantial infrastructure development that connected these regions to established trade networks and administrative communication systems throughout the empire. Road construction projects undertaken during this period created reliable transportation routes that enabled rapid movement of military forces and commercial goods between different parts of the empire, while the establishment of way stations and supply depots facilitated long-distance travel and communication. Archaeological surveys have identified numerous construction projects from this period that demonstrate the massive scale of imperial investment in integrating conquered territories into the broader Assyrian administrative and economic framework. The gradual disappearance of distinctive Hurrian cultural markers from archaeological contexts throughout former Mitanni territories indicates the effectiveness of Assyrian assimilation policies that systematically eliminated indigenous cultural practices while promoting imperial customs, traditions. Pottery production in these regions shifted from traditional Hurrian styles to standardized Assyrian forms, while metalworking techniques adapted to imperial specifications that emphasized functionality over decorative elaboration. These cultural transformations reflected broader changes in social organization that replaced traditional Hurrian community structures with Assyrian administrative arrangements designed to facilitate imperial control and resource extraction from subject populations. The archaeological record of destruction levels at major Mitanni sites provides dramatic evidence of the systematic nature of Assyrian conquest operations that eliminated not only political authority, but also the physical infrastructure that had supported Hurrian civilization for centuries. Excavations at sites throughout the Kabul Valley reveal consistent patterns of burning and deliberate demolition that indicate coordinated destruction rather than random violence, with particular attention to eliminating governmental buildings, religious installations, and defensive fortifications that might serve future resistance efforts. The comprehensive nature of this destruction created cultural discontinuities that marked the definitive end of independent Hurrian political authority and the beginning of a new historical period characterized by Assyrian imperial dominance throughout northern Mesopotamia. The systematic destruction of Mitanni's political institutions did not extinguish the cultural flame that had burned throughout the Hurrian heartland for over half a millennium of continuous development. Archaeological evidence from sites across northern Mesopotamia reveals a remarkable pattern of cultural persistence that defied Assyrian administrative policies, specifically designed to eliminate indigenous traditions and replace them with imperial customs. Excavations at Tel Mosen, ancient Urkesh, have uncovered residential quarters dating to the 12th and 11th centuries BC, where distinctly Hurrian pottery styles continued to be produced alongside officially mandated Assyrian ceramic forms required by imperial authorities. These vessels, characterized by their burnished red slip surfaces and geometric incised decorations, maintained traditional manufacturing techniques that had been passed down through generations of Hurrian craftsmen, despite the political upheavals that had transformed their world beyond recognition. The persistence of Hurrian religious practices within the Assyrian provincial system manifested itself through subtle adaptations that preserved core theological concepts while conforming to imperial religious requirements imposed by occupying authorities. Temple complexes throughout former Mitanni territory show evidence of continued worship of Hurrian deities, though often under Mesopotamian names that made such practices acceptable to Assyrian administrators seeking to maintain stability. The great storm god Teshub, central figure of the Hurrian pantheon, continued to receive veneration through identification with the Assyrian deity Adad, while the goddess Hepet maintained her protective functions under various local appellations that reflected regional linguistic variations and cultural adaptations. Cuneiform tablets recovered from Nuzi preserve invaluable ritual texts that demonstrate the remarkably sophisticated theological adaptations developed by Hurrian priests to maintain traditional worship practices within the strict constraints of imperial religious policy imposed by Assyrian authorities. These religious adaptations required considerable intellectual sophistication from Hurrian clergy, who had to skillfully navigate the complex theological landscape created by imperial conquest and cultural suppression. Priests developed innovative syncretic ritual practices that incorporated Assyrian ceremonial elements while preserving essential Hurrian theological concepts, creating hybrid religious forms that satisfied imperial requirements without abandoning ancestral traditions that defined their cultural identity. Archaeological discoveries of ritual objects from this period reveal the careful balance maintained by religious practitioners, with ceremonial vessels bearing traditional Hurrian decorative motifs, alongside inscriptions in Akkadian that identified them as appropriate for use in imperial religious contexts, approved by occupying authorities. The remarkable survival of Hurrian language in specialized contexts demonstrates the tenacious hold that indigenous cultural traditions maintained despite systematic pressure for assimilation throughout conquered territories. Legal documents from the 11th century BC discovered in private archives throughout former Mitanni territory preserve Hurrian terminology for property transactions, family relationships, and commercial agreements that had no precise equivalents in Akkadian or Assyrian legal vocabulary. These linguistic survivals indicate that Hurrian remained the preferred language for intimate community interactions, even as Akkadian became mandatory for official governmental and commercial purposes under imperial administration. Educational institutions that had formerly served Mitanni administrative needs transformed into centers for preserving Hurrian cultural knowledge under the guise of providing practical training for imperial service. Schools in major urban centers maintained instruction in Hurrian literature and historical traditions, while ostensibly preparing students for positions within the Assyrian administrative hierarchy that governed their territories. Archaeological evidence from scribal quarters in cities like Harran reveals libraries containing bilingual texts that preserved Hurrian epic poetry, religious hymns, and historical chronicles alongside the Akkadian translations required for official purposes by imperial authorities. The role of deported Hurrian specialists in transmitting cultural elements throughout the ancient Near East created unexpected opportunities for cultural diffusion that extended Mitanni influence far beyond the kingdom's original territorial boundaries. Skilled craftsmen relocated to Assyrian production centers brought with them sophisticated techniques for metalworking, textile production, and ceramic manufacturing that enhanced imperial capabilities while preserving traditional Hurrian artistic methods. Archaeological analysis of bronze objects from Assyrian workshops reveals the adoption of Hurrian decorative techniques that featured intricate geometric patterns and stylized animal motifs, characteristic of traditional Mitanni artistic expression. Hurrian scribes and administrative specialists, valued for their literacy and organizational skills, found employment throughout the Assyrian Empire, where their expertise proved essential for managing the complex bureaucratic requirements of imperial governance. These officials carried with them not only practical administrative knowledge, but also cultural traditions that influenced local practices in their new locations. Cuneiform tablets from Assyrian administrative centers as far south as Babylon preserve examples of Hurrian legal formulations and bureaucratic procedures that were gradually incorporated into standard imperial administrative practice. The influence of Hurrian religious specialists extended beyond the boundaries of former Mitanni territory, as Diaportes established communities throughout the Assyrian Empire that maintained traditional worship practices while adapting to local conditions. Temple archives from various Assyrian cities contain references to Hurrian priests who served in official capacities while secretly maintaining traditional religious observances within their expatriate communities. These religious practitioners developed sophisticated methods for preserving theological knowledge through oral traditions that could be transmitted without written records that might attract unwanted official attention from imperial authorities. Archaeological discoveries in Anatolia reveal the profound impact of Hurrian cultural traditions on Hittite, religious and artistic development during the period following Mitanni's political collapse. Excavations at Hittite religious centers have uncovered extensive archives of ritual texts written in Hurrian language that were used in major state ceremonies, indicating the high regard in which Hittite authorities held Hurrian theological expertise. These documents preserve complex mythological narratives featuring Hurrian deities whose adventures and relationships provided theological frameworks that influenced Hittite understanding of divine authority and cosmic order. The famous Kumarbi cycle, preserved in Hittite archives but composed in Hurrian language, demonstrates the sophisticated literary achievements of Hurrian culture and their lasting influence on ancient Near Eastern religious thought. This epic narrative, describing the succession of divine generations, culminating in the storm god's assumption of cosmic authority, provided theological concepts that influenced religious development throughout the region. The story's themes of generational conflict and divine succession found echoes in later Greek mythological traditions, suggesting cultural transmission chains that extended across vast geographical and chronological distances. Hurrian musical traditions preserved within Hittite court culture reveal another dimension of cultural survival that transcended political boundaries established by conquest and imperial administration. Archaeological discoveries of musical instruments from Hittite palace contexts show clear derivation from Hurrian prototypes, while cuneiform tablets preserve musical notation systems that appear to have originated in Hurrian religious ceremonies. These musical traditions incorporated complex rhythmic patterns and melodic structures that influenced ceremonial practices throughout Anatolia and northern Syria, creating lasting cultural legacies that persisted long after the political circumstances of their creation had disappeared. The transmission of Hurrian architectural techniques to various regions of the ancient Near East occurred through the activities of deported craftsmen who brought specialized knowledge of construction methods developed in the challenging environmental conditions of northern Mesopotamia. Archaeological analysis of building techniques employed in Assyrian construction projects reveals the adoption of Hurrian innovations in foundation design, water management, and structural reinforcement that prove particularly valuable for construction in regions with similar geographical challenges. These technical transfers enhanced imperial construction capabilities while preserving traditional Hurrian engineering knowledge that continued to influence building practices for centuries. Settlement patterns throughout former Mitanni territory demonstrate remarkable continuity despite the political transformations that had eliminated indigenous governmental structures. Archaeological surveys reveal that many communities maintained traditional village layouts and agricultural practices that had characterized Hurrian settlement for centuries, adapting to imperial administrative requirements while preserving essential elements of community organization. These settlements typically featured central areas reserved for traditional community gatherings alongside new facilities required for imperial tax collection and administrative oversight. The persistence of traditional agricultural techniques in former Mitanni territories reflects the practical value of indigenous knowledge systems that had been developed through generations of experience with local environmental conditions. Irrigation networks constructed during the Mitanni period continued to function under Assyrian administration, with maintenance procedures that preserved traditional engineering approaches while incorporating improvements suggested by imperial technical specialists. Archaeological investigation of these irrigation systems reveals evidence of continuous use and gradual modification that maintained essential functions while adapting to changing administrative requirements. Pottery production in former Mitanni territories provides particularly clear evidence of cultural continuity within changing political circumstances. Archaeological analysis of ceramic assemblages from the 12th through 10th centuries BC reveals the persistence of traditional Hurrian vessel forms and decorative techniques alongside the gradual adoption of Assyrian stylistic elements. This ceramic evidence indicates that local communities maintain traditional domestic practices while adapting to imperial commercial requirements that favored standardized production methods. The survival of Hurrian personal names in administrative documents throughout the Neo-Assyrian period demonstrates the persistence of indigenous identity markers, despite official pressure for cultural assimilation. Legal texts and administrative records preserve thousands of personal names that maintain traditional Hurrian linguistic elements, often combined with Assyrian or Akkadian components that reflect the hybrid cultural environment created by imperial conquest. These naming patterns indicate that families maintain connections to ancestral traditions while adapting to the practical requirements of life under imperial rule. Commercial networks that are developed during the Mitanni period continued to function under Assyrian administration, though with modifications that reflected changing political circumstances and imperial economic priorities. Archaeological evidence from trading centers throughout northern Mesopotamia reveals the persistence of traditional commercial relationships alongside new trading patterns that connected former Mitanni territories to distant regions of the Assyrian Empire. These commercial continuities provided mechanisms for cultural transmission that preserved Hurrian influences in regions far from their original homeland. The influence of Hurrian legal traditions on subsequent Mesopotamian jurisprudence appears in various legal texts that preserve distinctive Hurrian approaches to property rights, family law, and commercial regulation that continue to shape legal thinking long after the kingdom's political disappearance. And so the remarkable story of the Mitanni Empire comes to its end, not with the silence of complete destruction, but with the whispered echoes of a civilization that refused to die, from the fertile valleys of the Kabur to the distant courts of Anatolia, from the workshops of Assyrian cities to the secret rituals of expatriate communities. The spirit of Mitanni lived on. Their innovations in warfare, diplomacy, and governance would influence empires for centuries to come, proving that true civilizational greatness lies not in conquest alone, but in the ideas, traditions, and cultural achievements that outlast even the mightiest kingdoms. These jurisprudential principles, transmitted through the professional activities of Hurrian legal experts who secured positions in imperial administrative frameworks, contributed significantly to establishing standardized legal procedures that incorporated diverse elements from various regional traditions throughout the ancient world. Archaeological discoveries of legal archives from the Neo-Assyrian period reveal the gradual synthesis of different legal traditions into comprehensive imperial legal systems that governed vast territories. Fabric manufacturing techniques developed in Mitanni workshops continued to influence production practices throughout the ancient Near East, as relocated artisans established manufacturing centers in their new settlements. Archaeological examination of textile remains from various archaeological sites reveals the persistence of distinctive Hurrian weaving techniques and decorative patterns that maintain traditional artistic elements while adapting to local material availability and market preferences in different regions. These textile traditions contributed significantly to the development of luxury goods production that enhanced imperial economic capabilities while preserving traditional Hurrian artistic knowledge for future generations. The transformation of Hurrian cultural traditions through interaction with other regional cultures created syncretic forms that preserved essential elements while adapting to new environmental and social conditions encountered in diaspora communities. Archaeological evidence from Syrian sites reveals the development of hybrid cultural forms that combined Hurrian religious practices with local traditions, creating distinctive regional variations that maintained connections to ancestral homeland, while establishing new cultural identities adapted to local circumstances. The gradual integration of Hurrian cultural elements into broader ancient Near Eastern civilization occurred through complex processes of cultural exchange that operated alongside political and economic transformations throughout the region. These cultural transmission mechanisms ensured that significant aspects of Hurrian civilization survived the political destruction of the Mitanni kingdom, contributing to the rich cultural heritage that characterized the ancient Near East during the first millennium BC. Archaeological evidence continues to reveal new dimensions of this cultural survival, demonstrating the resilience of human cultural traditions in the face of political upheaval and systematic efforts at cultural suppression by imperial powers. The methodical excavation of ancient Near Eastern archaeological sites, beginning in the mid-19th century, gradually unveiled the forgotten civilization of the Mitanni Empire, whose very existence had been largely erased from historical memory by the thoroughness of Assyrian conquest and subsequent cultural suppression efforts. French archaeologist Ernest de Sarzec's pioneering work at Tello in the 1870s first brought attention to cuneiform tablets, mentioning Hurrian personal names and geographical references that suggested a previously unknown political entity in northern Mesopotamia. Initial discoveries prompted more systematic investigations at sites such as Tel Brak, where Max Mallowan's excavations in the 1930s uncovered substantial architectural remains and administrative archives that provided the first concrete evidence of Mitanni urban planning and governmental organization throughout their territorial holdings. The excavations at Tel Brak revealed a complex urban center featuring massive defensive walls constructed from fired brick, administrative buildings equipped with sophisticated record-keeping facilities, and residential quarters that demonstrated careful urban planning adapted to the challenging environmental conditions of northern Mesopotamia. The site's stratigraphy showed clear evidence of multiple construction phases corresponding to different periods of Mitanni political development, with the most impressive architectural remains dating to the 15th and 14th centuries BC, when the kingdom reached its greatest territorial extent and cultural sophistication. Archaeological investigation of the palace quarter uncovered throne rooms decorated with elaborate wall paintings featuring traditional Hurrian religious motifs alongside Indo-Aryan ceremonial elements, providing tangible evidence of the cultural synthesis that characterized Mitanni civilization throughout its golden age. The discovery of cuneiform archives at Tel Brak and related sites provided crucial documentation of Mitanni administrative procedures, legal systems, and diplomatic relationships that had been preserved despite the systematic destruction that accompanied Assyrian conquest. These tablets, numbering in the thousands, revealed sophisticated bureaucratic structures that managed complex territorial holdings, tribute collection systems, and military organizations across vast geographical distances. The administrative records demonstrated the kingdom's remarkable capacity for coordinating activities between the central government at Washakani and provincial centers throughout Syria and northern Mesopotamia, utilizing communication networks and standardized procedures that facilitated effective imperial governance. Parallel excavations at Tel Leilan, under Harvey Weiss's direction, beginning in the 1970s, uncovered additional evidence of Mitanni urban development and agricultural management that complemented discoveries from other major sites throughout the region. The excavations revealed extensive irrigation systems, grain storage facilities, and craft production workshops that demonstrated the economic foundations supporting Mitanni political and military achievements. Archaeological analysis of agricultural installations showed sophisticated water management techniques that maximized crop productivity while preventing soil degradation, indicating advanced understanding of environmental engineering that enabled sustained agricultural surpluses essential for supporting large urban populations and military forces. The systematic investigation of Nuzi by American archaeologists in the 1920s and 1930s produced one of the most comprehensive archives of cuneiform documents from any ancient Near Eastern site, providing unprecedented insights into Mitanni social organization, legal procedures, and daily life during the kingdom's mature period. These tablets, numbering over 5,000 documents, preserve detailed records of property transactions, family relationships, commercial agreements, and legal disputes that reveal the sophisticated jurisprudence systems that govern Mitanni society. The Nuzi archives demonstrated the complex interactions between Hurrian indigenous traditions and Indo-Aryan legal concepts that created hybrid legal systems adapted to the multi-ethnic character of Mitanni civilization. The linguistic analysis of Hurrian cuneiform texts represented one of the most challenging aspects of Mitanni historical reconstruction, as the Hurrian language belonged to an isolated linguistic family with no known relatives that could provide comparative frameworks for translation efforts. Early attempts at decipherment by scholars such as Johannes Friedrich and Ephraim Speiser in the 1930s and 1940s established basic grammatical structures and vocabulary elements, but comprehensive understanding of Hurrian linguistic systems required decades of painstaking philological work by successive generations of specialists. The breakthrough came through comparative analysis of bilingual texts that preserved Hurrian passages alongside Akkadian translations, enabling scholars to establish correspondences between linguistic elements and gradually reconstruct Hurrian grammatical systems. The decipherment process revealed Hurrian as an agglutinative language featuring complex verbal morphology and sophisticated case systems that reflected the intellectual sophistication of its speakers. Hurrian literary texts preserved in cuneiform archives demonstrated advanced poetic traditions, complex mythological narratives, and sophisticated theological concepts that influenced religious development throughout the ancient Near East. The famous Kumarbi cycle, composed in Hurrian but preserved in Hittite archives, revealed epic literature of exceptional quality that provided insights into Hurrian cosmological beliefs and divine hierarchies, while demonstrating the cultural influence that Mitanni civilization exerted on neighboring societies. The discovery and analysis of the Amarna letters, beginning with their initial excavation by local villagers in 1887, revolutionized scholarly understanding of ancient Near Eastern international relations and revealed the central role that Mitanni diplomacy played in maintaining regional stability during the Late Bronze Age. These cuneiform tablets, numbering over 350 documents, preserved actual diplomatic correspondence between royal courts that demonstrated sophisticated protocols governing international relationships, commercial agreements, and military cooperation arrangements. The letters reveal the complex personal relationships that developed between rulers of different kingdoms, with Mitanni kings such as Tushratta maintaining intimate friendships with Egyptian pharaohs that transcended purely political considerations. The Amarna correspondence demonstrated the sophisticated diplomatic culture that flourished during Mitanni's golden age, with elaborate gift exchange systems, carefully negotiated marriage alliances, and complex treaty arrangements that created stable frameworks for international cooperation. Tushratta's letters to Amenhotep III reveal the detailed protocols governing diplomatic relationships, including proper forms of address, ceremonial procedures, and gift-giving customs that maintained royal dignity while facilitating practical cooperation between sovereign powers. These documents provided unprecedented insights into the personal dimensions of ancient diplomacy, showing how individual relationships between rulers influenced broader patterns of international politics. The analysis of diplomatic gift exchanges documented in the Amarna letters reveal the economic dimensions of international relationships that extended far beyond symbolic gestures to encompass substantial commercial transactions. Mitanni presents to foreign courts included elaborate golden jewelry, precious stones, fine horses, and luxury textiles that represented significant economic value while demonstrating the kingdom's wealth and technological capabilities. The careful documentation of gift specifications and values created legal precedents that could be referenced in future negotiations while establishing frameworks for commercial relationships that operated alongside formal diplomatic arrangements. Contemporary scholarly reassessment of Mitanni's role in ancient Near Eastern politics has emphasized the kingdom's crucial function in maintaining the balance of power system that characterized international relations during the Late Bronze Age. The Mitanni alliance with Egypt created a stable framework that prevented either Hittite or Assyrian expansion from achieving regional dominance, while Mitanni control over northern Syrian territories provided buffer zones that protected smaller kingdoms from absorption by larger imperial powers. This diplomatic architecture enabled the flourishing of urban civilizations throughout Syria and Palestine that might otherwise have been destroyed by continuous warfare between competing empires. The recognition of Mitanni's diplomatic innovations has led to increased scholarly appreciation of the kingdom's contributions to the development of international law and diplomatic protocol in the ancient world. Recent archaeological investigations utilizing advanced scientific techniques have revealed new dimensions of Mitanni technological achievements that were previously unrecognized or underappreciated by earlier scholarship. Metallurgical analysis of bronze artifacts from Mitanni sites has demonstrated sophisticated alloying techniques that produced materials with enhanced properties compared to contemporary products from other regions, establishing the kingdom as a major center for luxury goods production that supplied markets throughout the ancient Near East. The revolutionary application of satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar technology to archaeological investigation of former Mitanni territories has revealed the truly extensive scale of urban planning and agricultural development that supported the kingdom's remarkable political, military achievements throughout its golden age. Advanced remote sensing techniques have successfully identified irrigation networks extending over hundreds of square kilometers, urban centers with meticulously planned layouts, and sophisticated road systems that connected different parts of the kingdom through highly efficient transportation networks that facilitated communication and commerce. These groundbreaking discoveries have conclusively demonstrated the sophisticated infrastructure development that enabled Mitanni civilization to flourish magnificently in the challenging environmental conditions of northern Mesopotamia, revealing engineering capabilities that rival those of any contemporary ancient civilization. Contemporary scholarly debates regarding the precise nature and extent of Indo-Aryan influence within Mitanni civilization continue to generate significant academic discussion as new archaeological evidence provides additional data for rigorous analysis. Some leading scholars emphasize the limited numerical presence of Indo-Aryan populations within the broader Hurrian demographic majority, arguing that Indo-Aryan cultural elements represented elite adoption of prestigious foreign traditions rather than fundamental transformation of indigenous society throughout the kingdom. Alternative interpretations stress the disproportionate political and military influence exercised by Indo-Aryan elites whose specialized knowledge of horse training and chariot warfare provided crucial advantages that enabled their integration into dominant positions within Hurrian political structures. The complex question of Hurrian Indo-Aryan cultural synthesis has become increasingly sophisticated as archaeological evidence reveals varying patterns of cultural interaction in different regions and time periods throughout Mitanni history. Urban centers such as Wasukani show extensive evidence of cultural blending that created hybrid artistic traditions, architectural styles, and religious practices, combining elements from both cultural backgrounds in remarkably creative ways. Rural areas, by contrast, often maintain more traditional Hurrian cultural patterns with limited Indo-Aryan influence, suggesting that cultural synthesis occurred primarily among elite populations rather than affecting broader social groups uniformly throughout the kingdom's diverse territories. Linguistic evidence from Mitanni cuneiform archives provides crucial data for understanding the intricate mechanisms of cultural interaction between Hurrian and Indo-Aryan populations throughout the kingdom's history. The preservation of Sanskrit-derived terminology for horse training, chariot construction, and military organization indicates specialized knowledge transmission that occurred through direct contact between Indo-Aryan specialists and Hurrian administrative systems. However, the limited extent of Indo-Aryan linguistic influence on general Hurrian vocabulary suggests that cultural interaction remained concentrated in specific technical domains rather than producing comprehensive linguistic transformation across all aspects of society. The broader context of late Bronze Age international relations has received increased scholarly attention as researchers recognize the interconnected nature of political developments throughout the ancient Near East during Mitanni's period of greatest influence on regional affairs. The kingdom's sophisticated diplomatic relationships with Egypt, Hittite Anatolia, and Assyrian Mesopotamia created intricate networks of alliance and opposition that influenced political stability across vast geographical regions. Mitanni's crucial role as an intermediary between these major powers enabled the maintenance of competitive balance that prevented any single empire from achieving regional hegemony during the 15th and 14th centuries BC. The catastrophic collapse of this diplomatic balance following Mitanni's devastating internal succession crisis and subsequent Hittite intervention had cascading effects throughout the region that contributed to the broader political instability characterizing the late Bronze Age collapse. The elimination of Mitanni as an independent political force removed a crucial stabilizing element from the international system, enabling more aggressive expansion policies by surviving powers, while eliminating diplomatic frameworks that had previously facilitated peaceful conflict resolution. These developments contributed significantly to the pattern of increasing warfare and political fragmentation that mark the transition from the late Bronze Age to the early Iron Age throughout the ancient Near East. Modern understanding of Mitanni civilization continues to evolve dramatically as ongoing archaeological investigations and scholarly analysis reveal new dimensions of the kingdom's achievements and lasting influence on human civilization. The recognition of Mitanni's crucial role in ancient Near Eastern political development has elevated the kingdom from historical obscurity to acknowledgement as one of the major powers that fundamentally shaped regional civilization during the second millennium BC. This scholarly reassessment reflects broader changes in archaeological methodology and historical interpretation that emphasize the importance of previously marginalized societies in understanding the complex processes of cultural development and political change in the ancient world. The enduring legacy of Mitanni civilization extends far beyond its immediate chronological and geographical boundaries through the profound cultural influences that persisted long after the kingdom's political destruction by Assyrian forces. Hurrian religious traditions, artistic techniques, and technological innovations continued to influence developments throughout the ancient Near East for centuries following the Assyrian conquest, demonstrating the remarkable impact of cultural achievements that transcended political circumstances. The preservation of Hurrian cultural elements within later civilizations provides powerful testimony to the sophisticated nature of Mitanni society and its lasting contributions to the rich cultural heritage of ancient Near Eastern civilization. The study of Mitanni history has thus been transformed from an obscure academic specialization to a crucial component of ancient Near Eastern historical understanding, revealing the complex interactions between political power, cultural development, and international relations that characterize one of history's most dynamic periods. The kingdom's dramatic rise from regional fragmentation to imperial dominance, followed by internal crisis and ultimate destruction, provides valuable insights into the factors that enable political success and the vulnerabilities that can lead to rapid collapse, even among seemingly powerful civilizations. These profound historical lessons continue to resonate with contemporary scholars seeking to understand the complex dynamics of political development and cultural change in human societies across different historical periods and geographical contexts throughout world history. The Mitanni Empire stands as a testament to the incredible heights human civilization can achieve when innovation meets opportunity, when diverse cultures blend to create something greater than the sum of their parts, and when diplomatic wisdom guides military might. From their revolutionary chariot warfare to their sophisticated diplomatic protocols, from their masterful urban planning to their enduring cultural contributions, the Mitanni proved that true power lies not in conquest alone, but in the ability to create lasting institutions and cultural achievements that continue to influence humanity long after the political structures that created them have crumbled to dust. Today, as archaeologists continue to uncover new evidence of Mitanni achievements, and scholars gain deeper understanding of their contributions to human civilization, we are reminded that history is filled with remarkable civilizations whose stories deserve to be told and whose lessons deserve to be learned. The Mitanni Empire may have fallen over 3 millennia ago, but their legacy lives on in every diplomatic treaty, every technological innovation, and every cultural synthesis that enriches our world today. In the wind-swept ruins of ancient Wasukani, in the irrigation channels that still carry water through the Khabur Valley, and in the cuneiform tablets that preserve their words for eternity, the Mitanni continue to speak to us across the centuries, reminding us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, human creativity, resilience, and cultural achievement can create legacies that outlast empires and inspire generations yet to come.